the rest of our team? Oh. Charles will be. Mark? Okay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Budget and a PDC. Correct.
No. Huh? Oh, yes, Brian told me, and I was like,
one time I wanted to use
it's
that.
what I told him. I said, oh no, he goes, you think we'll need it today? Oh, definitely. Definitely. He says,
So I'll use
of
this,
course.
and then I'll give Tom the.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Need it. Yeah.
You know, because at a certain point, there wasn't some neighborhood association. So he's even chair ever since.
Call into order the December 11th, 2014 meeting of the Portland Development Commission. Gina, would you call the roll?
Chair Kelly,
Here.
Commissioner Dixon, absent. Commissioner Edlin,
Here.
Commissioner Mollis. Here. Commissioner Wilhoit.
Here.
Thank you. Before we get into the commissioner reports, there's a few changes in what we're going to be doing today. We're going to continue with the agenda as you see it. However, we're not going to today vote on the URA amendments. We're not going to vote, although it already wasn't planned to be voting on the ZRZ, but we're going to continue with a informational item there. And then the Portland State University DA agreement we will be voting on. So just a few changes so everybody knows. Would hope everybody stays because we are going to go forward with informational discussion about all of those. So commissioner reports. Commissioner Mollis.
And I want to thank you, Chair Kelly, and I always forget to look at my calendar beforehand and see what I've done. I know I attended the NAA dinner, that it was the Portland Art Museum. That's their annual dinner that's for the Native American Youth and Family Center, which is always a great event. And it seems to me I attended one more, so maybe I'll wave when I remember it.
We'll let you wave when you remember. Commissioner Wilhoit.
I will ditto Commissioner Mollis's report. I was at the same dinner, so.
Thank you.
I was
Commissioner
at the Portland Business Alliance evening, Rosemary Anderson event, and the same event you two were at, and 8 staff meetings.
That's all?
That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, my report, I visited the University of Portland with Patrick. We went out there and toured around some of the land that they have down on the river, which was actually enlightening, and I think there's some, they're going to be doing quite a bit of development of that property. It's the old McCormick Baxter site and some adjacent lands over the next number of years, and could be pretty exciting for the university and for our city. Been to several check-in meetings in the mayor's office, November 14th Strategic Plan Steering Committee, and on the 1st I was back over to the mayor's office for a check-in. Actually kind of a light duty schedule in the last month, thank you.
I did attend that important Pac-12 championship game, but when I got there, the wrong Arizona team was playing, so.
That worked out.
So
Well,
that
it
means
was-
my Sun Devils didn't get pounded by Oregon, the Wildcats.
Did we have a quorum at that game? I was there too. We wouldn't have wanted to have met up or we would have been in trouble. Executive Director report, Patrick Quinton.
Thank you very much, Chair Kelly. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I think part of the reason why it was a light month for Chair Kelly is I left town for a while. I went to Germany, so we gave you a break. But yeah, so I actually did spend a week in Munich, Germany, as part of a Brookings Institution conference to study the German apprenticeship model and the how the German government supports their small and medium manufacturers. So it was 6 cities from around the country had delegations there, and all of us are struggling with how do we maintain our manufacturing bases and how do we, more importantly, train the next generation of workers for these firms, knowing that these are well-paying jobs that most of them don't require a college degree, and so they offer great opportunities for a lot of young folks in our city, but there's so much about the German model that goes back, hundreds of years, and so much of it's in the culture that, a lot of questions were asked at the end about how we transfer to the U.S. market. So, but as we work on our new strategic plan, it does bring lessons back. So, since our last meeting, we completed the proposal period for the Lentz RFI. So the period is closed for proposals, and we've received nine responses to the RFI. So this was the the request for proposals on 6 strategic properties in Lenstown Center. 5 of the properties are ones we own, and then the 6th is a privately owned property, but they participated in the RFI. The selection committee, the review committee is now beginning to meet to review the 9 proposals. The early look at the 9 is pretty promising. We have a good diversity of proposals, and some of them are more narrowly focused, and some are quite expansive. So I think we do have some good choices, and so I think the selection committee should come out with some recommendations that are actionable. I don't, off the top of my head, have the exact timeline. When do we expect the committee to have their recommendations back? Do we know? Middle of January. Maybe by our next board meeting, we should have some additional news on that recommendation. The selection committee is a combination of community representatives, PDC staff, and I think housing and mayor's office staff. We just issued, so the Lentz RFI closed, we're reviewing those. We just issued an RFI for the property that we own in Gateway on Weidler, right? I'm sorry, 106 and Halsey, yeah. So it's adjacent to the park property owned by Portland Parks. And so that we just issued that RFI. Responses are due at the end of January, January 30th. And so once again, we're hoping for some responses to that. That fronts a busy commercial corridor, and it would be adjacent to the park. So it's an attractive site. So we're hoping for a lot of responses on that. You may have read in the newspaper this week that that Hollywood came to Portland, at least briefly, for a big-time movie premiere. We had the movie Wild, which is a book written by now a Portland-based author, Cheryl Strait, a personal memoir that was made into a movie by Reese Witherspoon, and much of it was filmed in Oregon. It's about a woman who hikes the Pacific Coast Trail. So the movie is entirely, along the trail, and so it's a lot of wonderful shots of Oregon scenery. And so when they had the various premieres of the movie, they did one in Portland. That was Monday night, and it was just a great celebration, not only of Oregon, but also the hard work that goes into maintaining a pretty active film and video scene and industry here in Portland and Oregon. We have the Portland Film Office within PDC. Shelley Mattoon is our person who represents the city to anybody who comes to town looking to find locations and have permits issued and whatnot to film here. So she works with shows like Grimm and other shows, but also movies like that. But then the state has its own film and video office, but the state also provides tax credits to films and videos that are shot here, and so that provides economic benefit to the state economy. So it's a nice celebration of all that activity and kind of confirmation of everything that we're doing in that industry. Last week we held our annual industry event for the athletic and outdoor industry. The athletic and outdoor industry is one of our target clusters. We've been working in the industry for a very long time and have quite deep relationships. This, of course, is the industry anchored by Nike and Adidas and Columbia, but there's more than 300 small local firms. Many of them are actually located in Portland, and so this has become kind of a growing event for us. What's really cool about it is that we unveiled a digital map of the industry, which I encourage everybody to check out. You can go online. The website that we maintain for the industry is called aoportland, all one word, .com. I think you can also find it through our website. But if you recall, 5 years ago, we produced a visual map of the industry, and it had all the companies and bubbles, but it was a two-dimensional map that at the time was incredibly well received, and it was a big hit. But the day it was printed, it was outdated because the industry is always changing, and so we seized upon the opportunity to take this two-dimensional map and basically make it three-dimensional, an interactive map. And the good thing is that by the time we got around to updating it, a new organization called Oregon Storyboard had formed. I'm on the board and kind of helping get it started. The state's a big funder, but it's designed to promote the digital storytelling industry and kind of take advantage of all the advances in not just film and video in Oregon, but also the developments around software and technology. And so one of the firms that's working with that organization developed this interactive display. And so you can literally go on your computer and click on any of the little clusters, and you see companies, and you can click on their history, and then you click the website, and you can see over time how the industry has grown. So it's really a fantastic depiction of the industry and a great evolution of our ability to tell the story of our industries. Two of our Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts received Spirit of Portland Awards over the past month. Spirit of Portland Awards are actually they're awarded by the City of Portland, really through the Office of Neighborhood Involvement, does this annually to recognize organizations and individuals who engage in activities to make a positive change in our community. Rosewood and Jade the Jade District really are two all-star districts. You'll recall the Jade District had this very successful night market. And so it's brought a lot of attention to that area and as a foundation for that district for next year for more activities. And Rosewood has always been kind of the real kind of leader in the MPIs around building the strong community coalition around a number of issues. And they're working in, I think, some of the most challenging parts of the city, right on the edge of Gresham, where there's so many different issues around, the border between Portland and Gresham. And so both of them got awards. And so it's great that there's recognition for all the work they're doing. We just received notice that Rosewood, if you recall, Rosewood got a notice of an award, I think, from the Meyer Memorial Trust, and then they just got another award. So they're successfully telling their story to funders as well. So that's a key step forward for them. Speaking of awards, the American Society of Landscape Architects just named Dawson Park as, I think it received 2 awards for People's Choice Awards at their Design Award dinner, and then also a Merit Award in the general design category. But it's just great recognition. I think we all are really particularly proud of Dawson Park and what it's become, and not just on the design side, it's a fabulous design, but how it's really fulfilling its promise as a community kind of gathering spot, and it's great to get some recognition for that. It is the season, I think you all know, it's a season where people do a lot of shopping, and there are a lot of efforts underway in the city to promote shopping local, and we certainly support that. We, through various activities that we are engaged in, whether it be our Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative districts, our Main Street districts, the work that we do in promoting small businesses throughout the city, our support for Venture Portland. We were active supporters of neighborhood small businesses, and so we want to encourage everybody, if you have dollars to spend and are looking for really interesting products and services, please check out your neighborhood stores. One place to start is right here in Old Town. So we've had a program in place for a few years now called our pop-up shop program, and we did it downtown, on the other side of Burnside in previous years, where empty storefronts were used for fledgling businesses to have a home temporarily, to have a retail presence, and then it would help them grow their business, and in some cases find a permanent retail home. That obviously, I think, proved really successful in the heart of downtown, and so we've taken the pop-up concept into Old Town. So just 2 blocks from here, we have 3 companies that are setting up shop for the season right at the corner at 11 Northwest 5th. We have Drapeland Design Company, which features field notes, memo books, and other kind of crafty stuff. North Street Bags offers waterproof and convertible backpacks, panniers, and travel packs for cyclists. And then there's a company called Omiyagi, which celebrates the Japanese tradition of gift giving with Asian-inspired arts and crafts by local artisans, designers, and authors. So those 3 are pop-up shops. You can see them there. And then we've had a number of new entrants into that intersection, like Silver Dollar Pizza and Mimero Mole, which has become a favorite lunch spot for people. So a lot of new activity in Old Town, and we encourage people to patronize those stores and other neighborhoods. And then lastly, just a little bit of an update on Lent. I think everybody knows that one of the signature projects in Lenstown Center was our work with Assurity Northwest to develop their building on Foster. And we heard the news a few months back that they had been sold and they had moved out of their building. Everyone wanted to make that out to be a bad news story. We thought a great story as a lens-based company had grown and exited. We celebrate that in the startup community all the time, and so we want to celebrate that in our neighborhood businesses too. But there's a lot of concern over what would happen to the space, and I think you probably read in the paper, there's a kind of a startup shared space company called Venture Business Centers. It has a couple locations here in downtown, was growing enough that they began to look for other locations, and so they've leased 13,000 square feet of space in Lents and are finding that there's significant demand for space there. So we're happy to, we were quite confident, not being overly optimistic, but confident that there was going to be demand for this space, and so we're happy to see that happened so quickly. So with that, I'm done, but I do, Chair Kelly mentioned the change in the agenda, and I do just want to just extend my appreciation for your flexibility in dealing with what's obviously an incredibly complicated set of actions or packages that are coming before you, and acknowledging that a lot of this is happening real time and we're getting feedback real time, and so we appreciate your flexibility as we get to a conclusion on this. So thanks.
All right, our next item is public comment for items not on the agenda, and I don't think we have anybody signed up. Is that right? All right, well, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Resolution 1448, Report 1448, Resolution 7080, action item authorizing the Executive Director to increase expenditures to no more than $850,000 for the North-Northeast Enterprise Zone Fund allocation to WorkSystems, Inc.
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion. If we have one commissioner stepped out, are we going to be able to vote on this without him? Okay, so can we just put that motion on hold and second, and when the other commissioner comes back, we'll...
Might be in a bad mood later. I might not move approval.
You know, I know that it's in the spirit of Christmas and so on, that you'll, yes. Okay, next agenda item is the package of URA amendments, and we're going to take this on as a informational presentation today. We have Deputy Director Kimberly Branam and Lisa Abuaf, Central City Manager. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
I'm going to
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second because we've got a commissioner back. And on the consent agenda, Commissioner Molis, we have a motion and a second, and we're ready to vote. All right. All those in... Yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it, motion carries. Yes, sir. Ladies.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinton. I'm Kimberly Branam, Deputy Director here, and I'm joined by Lisa Abuaf, who's our Central City Manager. We are here today to brief you on the changes to the 6 urban renewal areas, as well as the related ZRZ development agreement, and to provide for your consideration the Portland State University Development Agreement. Before we begin, I would like to just recognize some of the colleagues who have worked on this and brought this forward. As you can imagine, with 6 urban renewal areas and 2 development agreements, it's been quite a team who's brought this forward. So I'd particularly like to recognize Geraldine Moyle, who's been point on the ZRZ development agreement, and Irene Bowers, who has been point with PSU, as well as Justin Douglas, who's worked on all of the URA amendments, Tony Barnes, Robert Smith, Bob Betcombe. And then I'd also like to recognize our consultant, Elaine Howard, who's actually a former PDC manager. I believe she was the first female manager here. So she's, we're very privileged to have her as our expert on this project. So as I mentioned, we, actually this is no longer accurate. We are not looking for your approval of the URA amendments, just the Portland State University Development Agreement. So we began working on this package in close collaboration with Mayor Hale's office. And last May, City Council took action to direct Portland PDC and our partners to finalize a package that would meet and balance 3 important objectives. So the first is to reduce the impact of urban renewal to taxing jurisdictions. The second, to preserve affordable housing investments and help the city better meet our redevelopment and economic development objectives, and to continue to support Portland State University, even with the closure of the education district. So we believe that this proposed package meets these objectives. As you'll hear, the amendments will return approximately $350 million over 30 years back to the taxing jurisdictions. It maintains the same level of investment in affordable housing, as well as allows us to invest in some transformational areas and opportunities in the coming years. And it provides greater certainty and more near-term resources for Portland State through the development agreement. So we, this schedule is actually changing, but it is accurate in terms of the sequencing. So since May, we've been working with the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee and have convened them with the mayor's office. We have, they wrapped up their recommendations in October. We presented to the Planning and Sustainability Commission earlier this week, and you'll hear from their chair, Andre Ba, as well. And then this morning we presented to Multnomah County. So the next step will be to come back to you in January, and then we will take the URA amendments and the ZRZ development agreement to City Council. So this is the final approval for the Portland State University development agreement today. So in addition to, let's see, do you want to go? Oh, so in addition to the Urban Renewal Area Amendment Advisory Committee, we also had an open house in early September and had individual conversations with neighborhood associations and business district groups, as well as key stakeholders, to talk about the impact to the taxing jurisdictions as well as into the areas that are affected by the URA changes. So I will say that in general, people were very positive, particularly about returning resources to the taxing jurisdictions. There were some areas of feedback that we received, and so we will highlight that as we go through the package today. So the subcommittee included our taxing jurisdiction partners, Portland Public Schools, as well as Multnomah County. It was chaired by Mayor Hale's office, Policy Director Jillian Detweiler, and we had our key partners as well as our Budget Advisory Committee members from the Central City. So here's the package. As you'll recall, we are proposing to reduce or eliminate 4 districts, the first being Airport Way. This has been an extremely successful district, and we have issued the last debt. There are limited resources at this point, and so we are recommending a release of 40% of the acreage that can be put back into the overall acreage that is allowed within the city. Within the River District, the reduction, the proposal is to reduce assessed value by 26%. We would be taking out some of the heart of the Pearl District where we've been where we believe we've been very successful, and so we really don't need to continue to keep those, to keep that on within the urban renewal area. This was an area where we had a lot of discussion within our Urban Renewal Area Advisory Committee. So there was a recommendation from that committee that we include Block 33, the gold block, which is the block right adjacent to us, and bring that from the downtown waterfront district into the River District. This that was the majority opinion. Both the League of Women Voters and Multnomah County were in the minority in not supporting that proposal. Based on feedback that we've received from City Council and in individual conversations, the proposed package does not include Block 33, so it would just be a reduction of the River District. Within the Willamette Industrial Urban Renewal Area, we are recommending essentially to close that district and to terminate collection of tax increment revenues, but to maintain the ability to invest in our manufacturing partners and some of their the key needs of the industry with the remaining bond proceeds of about $4 million into the future. And then finally, this proposal would close the education district, but add 35 acres from that district into the North Macadam Urban Renewal Area. The proposal also, do you have the clip? Thanks. We also propose extending and expanding the Central Eastside Urban Renewal Area and North Macadam. Within the Central Eastside, we would expand, it's a modest expansion to include Quinton Triangle adjacent to the Gideon Street Light Rail Station, and an increase by about 20% of maximum indebtedness, as well as extending the last date to issue debt by about 5 years, For North Macadam, we would expand by 45 acres, so 35 acres of the education district, as well as some additional adjacent acres. There's no change to maximum indebtedness that's proposed. What we would be able to do would be to access additional resources within the maximum indebtedness that's already been established. So here you see the proposed expansion of the Central East Side, which would take in the Quinton Triangle and the 11th and Powell intersection. Under the current status quo, between now and fiscal year 17-18, we would be able to invest in the acquisition of the ODOT blocks, put resources into some of our opportunity funds, the storefront and loans and DOS, put approximately $1 million into the Washington Monroe Community Center and about $4 million into affordable housing. With the new proposal, the amendment, between now and fiscal year 22-23, we would be able to look towards the acquisition of the ODOT blocks, as well as potential district parking solutions. Invest in Clinton Station, and in particular to make that site development ready. There are some considerable circulation challenges to that site, which is right adjacent, as I mentioned, to the light rail and an excellent site for transit-oriented development. Also be looking to make changes that would allow for the left turn off of Powell. So that would be of benefit to the entire Central East Side Industrial District. Would obviously still invest in Washington Monroe and have opportunity funds, and the amount available for affordable housing would increase to $10 million. So the North Macadam Urban Renewal Area, as you see here on the left as it is today and how it would be under the proposal. So the yellow is the areas that are currently in the education district, and the red are those that are outside. The boundaries were drawn specifically to support public-private partnerships that Portland State University saw as near-term opportunities, and Lisa will speak to those in more detail. And again, Lisa will talk about this in more detail, but just by way of comparison, in the status quo, we have limited resources to help complete the Greenway and Southwest Bond, some resources for property redevelopment and business development, and approximately $9 million for affordable housing. And that's between now and fiscal year 19-20. With the proposed amendment, we would be able to complete the Greenway north of Ross Island Bridge, make improvements or put in Southwest Bond, which is a really critical improvement for OHSU as well as for within the Zidell property. Invest in Portland State and University Place at about $19 million, put resources into business development, and then increase our affordable housing allocation to approximately $40 million. And some of those are on the conservative end, so actually if we exceed our projections, it might be even higher. So the overall net impact or benefit to Portland, to our agency, is basically that we are maintaining the level of resources. So in nominal dollars, there's a hit of about $36 million. But if you look at the present value, we are receiving, because we're receiving additional resources to invest in the near term, that offsets some of the reduction that we will have as a result of closing the education district. As I mentioned, City Council has prioritized maintaining the level of investment of affordable housing, and this package does that. The overall net impact from a present value perspective is an increase in $7 million, and that's as a result of these changes, and also a closeout strategy in the South Park blocks that increases, or that adds $5 million from redevelopment to housing. The benefit to taxing jurisdictions is approximately $130 million. So the city and the county receive significant resources over the next 30 years. And even in the near term, there are about $5.5 million that are going to the taxing jurisdictions in this fiscal year alone. And so that is the benefit in the near term. And finally, overall, you see in this table the impact to the urban renewal area acreage and frozen base. As you know, by statute, only 15% of the city of Portland's assessed value or acreage may be within an urban renewal area. We're quite close to that cap on the acreage side today. With these amendments, we have reduced it by about 2 percentage points, which would allow future councils, future future PDC boards, to access some of that and have flexibility to make investments or to expand districts in East Portland or other areas in the future. So with that, and before we go into the development agreements, we would be happy to take any questions.
Somebody told me that Commissioner Wilhoit asks the best questions, so I'm going to start with him.
I don't know if I want that pressure. Let's see here. Well, obviously I've been here a little bit, and I know Commissioner Moles and I talked about this. We're around when we put in the education URA. Times change, political bodies change, and the focus changes. And I think this is what we're really looking at. And the questions I have really related to what you've already laid out. We're looking at closing down or not opening the education URA, shifting some resources and land elsewhere, primarily allocating or reallocating tax resources back to the taxing jurisdictions. And I think that's hopefully first and foremost in everyone's mind because of what can be done with those resources at each of those jurisdictions. So the numbers that I'm seeing and the amounts are pretty significant, and I hope that's not lost on anyone. It's hard for me to say it makes sense to shut down the education URA since I was here when we voted to put it in. But because of the focus that we're talking about and releasing those resources to the taxing jurisdictions, I think this is a very favorable opportunity to consider. So I wanted to make that statement first. PSU's situation we're going to look at in the amendment that we're going to consider for approval today. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, and I think everyone would agree it's critical to have a very strong downtown university, and I think the steps we're taking put PSU in a position to continue to be that institution at an even higher level. So I'm positive about that as well. I'm eventually going to get to a question. When we look at the timing, and this is, I think, surprising to everyone a little bit, but the timing of it all, what are we really considering when we're saying we're not voting on these today and we're looking down the road? What are we considering?
In terms of the potential impact of the delay, or?
Yes, when will we be looking at voting on the amendments?
So we anticipate bringing this back for your consideration January 12th, I believe, is your
January
next
12th.
Huh? January 14th?
14th is a
14th,
14th.
okay, and I
January 14th.
apologize, I got here a little later, so you were probably had mentioned that. So in that interim period, are we opening this up, or is there, as far as who's looking at it now and what's going to happen in that interim period, I think everyone would be curious to know what we're thinking.
So, and Patrick can speak to this as well, I think we will continue to have conversations with our city council members and their offices, and want to make sure that if there are any amendments that would be brought forward, that those would be incorporated. I think we'll continue to have conversations with the Zidels and the other city bureaus as well.
Okay, and I know there's already been a significant amount of public involvement. Is that open as well, or what will we do in that regard? What are we thinking?
In terms of continuing to have
Yes.
public, certainly we will continue to talk to folks. We've heard a number of questions, and I think part of what is prompting the slight delay is that we needed to respond with some information on some of those questions, particularly around affordable housing, and we feel like we now have some of those answers, and so I think people will want some time to digest it and come up with their responses. But
Okay.
you might hear that from some folks today as well.
And the last question I have regarding affordable housing, that has been a topic of significant discussion, as it should be always. the resources that are freeing up to taxing jurisdictions, i.e. the city in particular, when we consider affordable housing, I'm assuming those discussions will talk about the resources that otherwise would have been inside a PDC now being available to the city, and there'll be discussion on that end regarding how much of that might be directed towards affordable housing. I know we don't control that, but I'm hoping in the circumstances when this is discussed that comes up, first and foremost, because that it seems to be one of the biggest issues outside of just the redirection of the resources to the taxing jurisdictions that people are really focusing on. And as I stated, as we should be focusing on it. So,
And I
too
think-
early to say, or
Well, I
is
think- I
that,
think we could
can we assume that?
I think we could definitely bring that forward as a recommendation that our board was hoping that city council would have a conversation about how those resources might be used.
And I think we saw in the numbers that for those areas where they were changing resources being allocated to housing with, the proposed amendments, significant dollars. I believe they added up to about $40 million or so, something in that neighborhood. So, well, we can never put enough to affordable housing, but we do have limited resources. It's nice to see us redirecting a significant amount of those dollars in that direction. And I'm hoping that when people look at the resources that are coming out of PDC, they really focus on how those might be committed at some level to affordable housing in a meaningful way. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Edlin.
Sure. Still being the new person here, I can claim that for a while longer. I have a question and I guess a request or a comment. On page 3 of the information we were provided, it talked about the public meeting, only 20 people showed up. Is that typical? I mean, it seems awfully light. And I saw we published it and whatnot, and then when you went out to the neighborhood associations, did you get a lot more people attending those?
Yeah, the neighborhood associations were standing meetings in general, and so I'm sure people look at the agendas, but those were standing meetings. And, I think urban renewal can be a fairly specific and detailed topic, so I'm not sure.
Riveting.
I'm not sure how many people felt called to come, but we have heard through the super notice. Because we have 2 substantial amendments, we have noticed all of the property owners in the city of Portland, and as a result of that, we've heard some questions. So there has been some public interaction.
My comment, I guess, also is on affordable housing. If I read the documents right, the big boost in housing doesn't come for another 5 years, roughly, in terms of when the additional money comes in. And again, being new to this body, I'm really curious about ways to pry more, maybe that's the wrong word, but pry more money out quicker. Whether that be figuring out a way to work with housing together in a fashion that maybe we aren't today. I don't know how that's happening, but it just seems like the need is really significant. And the second thing that I'm curious about, we were having a little talk beforehand, I brought up a question, and that is, are there opportunities to explore public-private partnerships where perhaps we have a mixed-use project that has a commercial component to it that would entice a private developer to want to get involved and use that to perhaps free up more dollars for an affordable housing component that maybe wouldn't need as much subsidy as it would otherwise. And I just think we've got to look at more stupid ideas to try to make that happen faster. And I know you're focused on it all the time, but I'd really like to encourage us to try to figure out how to work together within the various city bureaus to make that happen. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullis.
Thank you. And I share some of Commissioner Wilhoit's concerns about, restructuring the education district and how Portland State is treated throughout this deal. And it seems to me that a lot of people, the mayor's office, the PDC, President Buvell and his team at PSU put a lot of time into this. And so I'm comfortable with the changes that are being made. And I think it's appropriate for us to invest in TIF eligible projects at Portland State University. I think that's a good idea. And all in all, I'm in favor of what we're trying to do here. I think the overall program is good. I think it's probably appropriate that we are hitting the pause button just for a little bit to make sure that some of the public's concerns are being addressed, particularly in affordable housing. And I think Mark is going to be able to, or Commissioner Edlin's going to be able to bring some good ideas to the table that will hopefully help us solve this problem, so.
Thank you. I think that if I then say something about affordable housing, then we can say the record will show that all commissioners mentioned in affordable housing as a concern. So I'm doing that. And I don't know, should we be taking the testimony on this? We'll do it later, yeah.
Can I ask one additional question? It came up in my briefing, and you gave a great synopsis and summary of what's being impacted and how. And I'm looking at my good friend Debbie Kitchen, the head of the Business Alliance, and I asked this in my briefing because I've been here with Commissioner Moelis for a number of years. Old Town, Chinatown, and discussions of land going in were significant to me. And in my briefing, we talked about the resources that were already committed and what was available. And I think unless it's out of order or we don't have the information in a slide form, can we address that a little bit because it's very significant?
Absolutely. So the committee had considerable discussion around the priorities of Old Town Chinatown, and I think there was a feeling that Block 33 has been really important, and it's been a long held opportunity. And so given the resources within the River District, wouldn't we be able to invest in that block and make something happen? Unfortunately, the reality when we look at it from a staff perspective, I think in talking to city council offices, is that really the River District, particularly with the reduction of that we're proposing, is fairly cash constrained, and we have some major objectives, the Centennial Mills, which you'll hear about later, but Union Station, Post Office, as well as our commitment to investing significant resources in Old Town Chinatown. And so, in fact, River District, while sizable, has considerable demand, while Downtown Waterfront, which Block 33 is currently in, really right now has no programmed resource, has no projects identified, and there are $12 million that are available. And so I think at this point in the conversations that we've had, it felt like, we can reconsider if any of the major projects don't move forward in the next year or two, but that this might be appropriate to maintain at this time.
And that 12 million is not committed to other projects?
There's no commitment at this point.
So creative and eager people who are out there listening might pick up the phone and call and say, I have a good idea, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
And I
We would welcome it.
assume conversations taking place with the property owner?
Yes, we've talked to David.
And are they in consent as well?
When Mr. Gold came to the committee meeting, he seemed amenable to the idea that you would bring in and amend boundaries at the time that there was an identified project. So I can't speak to what he said after that, but at the time, that was his message to the committee.
Is that something that can be done in a timely fashion? I tell my people time will kill all deals.
Yeah, it would be a major amendment, not a substantial amendment, so it wouldn't require super notice. And so it would take a couple months, but it wouldn't take 6 months or a year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item then on the agenda is
I'd like to just make one more comment. The amount of work that you put into this, sitting through the briefing the other day, it's very, very impressive. It's a very complex topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the development agreement with ZRZ Realty on the Sidell properties.
Thank you, Kimberly, Chair Kelly, and Commissioners. Again, my name is Lisa Abuaf. I'm the Central City Manager with the Portland Development Commission, and we're actually going to rearrange the sequence a little bit and go through the Portland State Development Agreement prior to the ZRZ, given that that is the action that's before you today. In addition, we did want to come before you today to provide information on the status, the deliverables, the partnerships, and investments contemplated under the two development agreements. Before jumping into the presentation, I want to take a moment again to thank staff. It has been a tremendous amount of work, hours of effort, and with particular call out to Geraldine Moyle and Irene Bowers, as well as the significant dedication that it's taken from partners, both in terms of Portland State University, ZRZ Realty, and numerous city staff across multiple bureaus over the past few months. So as has been mentioned, we're seeking board action on authorizing the executive director to enter into a disposition and development agreement with Portland State University for multiple properties within the University District area and the University Place site. And the disposition and development agreement as written is conditioned on the urban renewal area amendment. So it won't go into effect until the amendment and those resources and the geography is available. The PSU agreement is a disposition and development agreement because it does consider transfer of PDC-owned property, and the board is the single approving body for the PSU development agreement since public investments committed under that agreement are PDC's TIF resources. As previously stated, for the second item, we are moving from an action to a briefing. The timing with the North Macadam Urban Renewal Area Amendment was important in terms of keeping the ZRZ Realty negotiations on track, because the amendment projections of TIF that Kimberly has shown you, and the TIF potential of an amended area is really critically tied to the 30 acres owned by the Zidell family developing for the district to perform financially. So we're here today to provide you with an overview of the agreement terms, and we do plan, similar with the URA amendments, to be back before you in mid-January for your authorization and approval. The ZRZ agreement negotiations are highly complex, and versus the PSU DA, they have involved multiple city bureaus, some of which you see listed here. It is anticipated that the DA would be implemented via subsequent IGAs or intergovernmental agreements with all of those bureaus. Over the past years, we've worked in good faith with ZRZ and city bureaus, and that's resulted in successful partnerships like donation and the construction of the and investment in the light rail alignment, as well as examples like BES working closely with PDC as well as the Zidell family to look at designing alternative district stormwater system treatments on their site. This DA is the next step in that partnership and would unlock the development of the largest undeveloped parcel in Portland Central City. So general provisions of both the development agreements ensure that both public and private projects benefiting from TIF investment will conform with PDC policies. These policies include our business equity program, our workforce equity program, and our green building policy, as well as others like the 2% for art and prevailing wage, depending on the project as applicable. So I'm going to walk now through the PDC PSU disposition and development agreement. This slide just gives you a sense of what some of the key highlight items are to our framework for our conversations with PSU over the past few months. Per City Council's directive, ensuring that the URA amendment package and related DA provides comparable support to PSU as the Education URA partnership, i.e. that this agreement is of comparable value to Portland State University and the growth of that district as the education district was when it was approved. I believe Dan Zalko, you'll hear from Dan Zalko, PSU's Executive Director for Planning, Construction, and Real Estate, who's here today to answer any questions and to provide comment on PSU's participation and partnership via this development agreement. As Kimberly referenced earlier, the projects contemplated under this agreement will also help implement the city's land use and density goals as well as the URA's urban renewal goals and support PSU's ongoing development. Third, based on existing North Macadam URA priorities, as we put together the amendment package, we wanted to make sure that the projects contemplated under this agreement continue to be met by the growth of any PSU-related projects within the amendment area, as well as the amended area, i.e. that the TIF investment that's committed via this development agreement is on par with the amount of taxable new development as well as the amendment area. Finally, as described in the board's report, comments on pending litigation, you'll note that there are certain red lines that have shown changes to an earlier copy of the development agreement terms that were circulated to you to reflect that PDC's investment, both in land and tax increment resources, are committed to non-educational taxable uses that support Portland State. Other areas of red lines, as you do look for term changes over the past week, include greater detail to PSU's conditions necessary for projects to progress, which we'll walk through on a project-by-project basis. Rights of first refusal for PSU to purchase properties that we're contemplating for disposition under this agreement at the end of the URA if the partnership is not realized. And greater detail in conversations with TriMet and with housing regarding particular terms for use on the 4th and Lincoln, which is a TriMet-owned site, and the University Place site, respectively. So I'm going to jump into the projects now. The DA relates to projects that can be thought about in 3 distinct phases, with each project to return back before you either via an intergovernmental agreement or a subsequent agreement, such as a purchase and sale with Portland State University or its partners. Initial investments in the next few years include, the first is actually an ongoing conversation between the city and PSU, which is happening under separate agreement from this disposition and development agreement for a shared city PSU commercial space, which could include 30,000 square feet or more of city office space. On a comparable schedule, with the realization of this development agreement, we would terminate the existing DoubleTree development agreement with Portland State on the site that's now called the University Place site. It was previously called the DoubleTree site. This would effectively terminate PSU's obligation to make payments in lieu of taxes, or pilot payments, which PSU has made to PDC over the past 10 years since acquiring the site and taking it off the tax rolls in the North Macadam urban renewal area. Lastly, in the near term, PDC would invest $2 million in the commercial ground floor uses of the new PSU School of Business Administration, and that's the site that you see at Block B, which was a commitment, and we're reflecting the timing and schedule of that commitment that's included in the existing education urban renewal area budget and forecast years that came before you last year. The last is that PDC would agree to transfer or sell 2 parcels owned by PDC at Southwest 4th and Montgomery, which is called the Jasmine Block, which is the area that you see under C on the map. The property constitutes just over 35,000 square feet of land. Conditions precedent to this transfer would include PSU confirming a shared development concept, whether with a private partner or the city. Both scenarios are contemplated by the development agreement, as well as their success at realizing state funding. The earliest this is anticipated is in 2017. The second phase of PDC investment contemplates making available up to $13 million, so this is the most sizable investment that is made under the development agreement. It's letter D on the map and would not incur until approximately 2020 or so. This investment timing is based on the available resources as modeled for the amended North Macadam urban renewal area. One of the things that's unique as we looked at the amendment to the North Macadam urban renewal area is that it is more reliant on new development to generate TIF required to accomplish the URA goals. Thus, the phasing of investment that we modeled as part of the amendment would start with investing in ZRZ early development, which would in turn create resources towards the University Place commitment. Similarly, the development agreement contemplates that PSU would carry an obligation to develop in partnership with the private sector or solely a minimum assessed value of development on that site of $66 million needed for the scale of investment to then be returned back into the urban renewal area and the broader district. Given the size of the parcel, it's also contemplated on this site, given your conversations around affordable housing, for PHB to have the right to purchase affordability of non-student housing as it's developed by PSU or its partner. And then last but not least, starting next year and based on significant outreach that PSU did conduct with TriMet, they took a look, broadly speaking, at the Lincoln Station transit-oriented development area. PSU is looking to issue an RFP for a development partner on the University Place site, which is just under 4 acres. The final phases of PDC's investments are towards the end of the urban renewal area, in and around 2024, 2025, should it be amended. Investment in commercial uses at PSU's Engineering and Science School would potentially be supportive of research and commercial activities on the ground floor. That is an existing building. It's a 2-story building at Harrison and 4th Avenue. Last, TriMet does own property at 4th and Lincoln, which is letter E on the map, which could be combined for redevelopment with an adjacent PSU-owned property, which is the art school building. It's just to the west of that property. This agreement contemplates in the near term PDC, PSU, and TriMet entering into a partnership to progress redevelopment and identifying a program on the site, which, should TriMet not be able to contribute land to the project, would result in PDC making available TIF to purchase the property for a PSU growth project at fair market value. So that's what you see here, that the contribution is either $2 million or land value at the time of acquisition, given that it's approximately 10 years away. In total, this agreement reflects an approximately $23 million commitment, which includes both land value and tax increment resources to support our ongoing development of the University District and the growth of Portland State University, which is on par with the education URA if you look at the timing and availability of funds to Portland State. Moving on to the ZRZ Development Agreement. Do you want to take an action? Okay.
What's that?
Before we move on, I always want to make sure we didn't want to have questions, talk about the,
Does anybody have any questions on the PSU?
we're going to walk through this.
They're pretty much summarized.
Charles?
Before you start, can I just highlight that you have a copy of the development agreement as we've been modifying language in the past few days. We've been, obviously it's tracked here. So if there are red lines, if you flip through it, a lot of the red lines are more form, but you do see the affordable housing language that Lisa summarized, which provides this first right of refusal on the University Place development. You can see some other changes here. I just want to make sure we do have the time and the opportunity right now to walk through any of these changes before you guys vote. There's language in here that highlights. You'll see red line language at the back that highlights the pending litigation regarding education expenditures. That's covered in here, but I just want to make sure that you feel free to ask any questions about the language in front of you.
Boy, how long would it take to walk through those changes? I think it's important to touch on these significant ones. I was going to ask about the litigation, and I was going to ask about the $2 million repurchase of the property, because $2 million today is not necessarily fair market value of $2 million 10 years from now. So we would be committing to potentially a higher amount than $2 million. So those are my two pieces, the litigation and the repurchase of that land.
So I'll answer the purchase of the land while Bob Betcone joins us in terms of the litigation. So the purchase of the land, what it contemplates is that PDC would make available TIF for an appraised value at the time that purchase occurred. So we would actually go out and get an appraisal of fair market value. There are available resources towards the end of the district. We've left them pretty unprogrammed just because it's at the end of the district and relies pretty heavily on new development assumptions, but the resources are available. And then one of the agreements is that should PSU choose not to put it in that site, then PDC's contribution would be capped at $2 million if they chose to put it on another project or another site that was mutually agreeable with
So that's
PDC.
PSU's choice if they choose another site?
It's both of it's a mutual agreement.
Okay. And are we fine if it's 4 million? And I know that's a weird question, but if it's 4 million, you say there are resources available, we're committed to keeping PSU in the same effective position, plus or minus, than they were in that education URA. Does that cause us concern? It might be 4 million. I'm making up a number, but for extreme purposes.
Yeah, but I mean, like a lot of these things, it all becomes resource dependent, right? So the district itself has to perform in that way. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're committing to. So.
Okay. You're on, Bob.
Good afternoon. Am I on? There we are. Good afternoon, Bob Betcone, Assistant General Counsel. I'd like to answer your question regarding the pending litigation. This matter is highlighted for you on starting on about page 27. And as the Executive Director indicated, PDC and the city and PSU are being subject to a lawsuit. And the plaintiffs are claiming that the proposed expenditures under this agreement should be classified in a way or characterized in a way that would be they would be characterized as educational expenditures. So this has accounting ramifications and taxing ramifications. And this is a matter that's pending in the courts right now. The language that you see in here indicates that while the suit is pending, that neither PSU nor PDC is obligated to move forward with the terms of this agreement. And if ultimately it were decided by a court that in fact these proposed expenditures need be characterized as educational, that this agreement could come undone, and that we would agree to renegotiate the terms in a way that didn't violate the constitutional provisions.
So we don't take any steps if the court comes back and says you can't do this, we don't do it, and we revisit the agreement and we negotiate to some other position. So we can't be in a position of taking steps, being committed, putting money in or land in, and then having a decision come out. We're not going to do that before the decision.
That's correct, Commissioner. We
Okay.
structured away from that.
Okay.
Do you have any expected timing on the resolution of this suit, and is it appealable?
I'm sorry, the second question?
Is it appealable?
The timing is not exactly certain. This is an unusual jurisdiction. It's the Oregon Tax Court. It is estimated that it is possible that the matter could be heard within a year. There's certainly the potential for motions practice, which could delay the ultimate hearing of the core issue. And it is appealable. I believe that the appeal is direct to the Supreme Court. And again, there are various estimates on how long that could take. I think our current thinking is that where the matter needed to be appealed to the Supreme Court, it still could reach that decision-making within a year and a half.
Is this in the same vein as the David Douglas-related urban renewal amendment that we dealt with years ago? As far as the complaint that it's not in line with permissible expenditures at PDC, is it the same type of a claim?
So this is, Eric might be able to address it. It's a little different. So that one was specific to urban renewal areas and was appealed to LUBA. So this is actually, Bob can correct, but this is actually not suggesting that they're illegal expenditures. It's suggesting that they should be charged towards education instead of general governance. So under Measure 5 and 50, we can allocate up to 5, right, so 5 per thousand for education before it reaches compression, at which point you can actually have an adverse impact on your state school fund or your school system. So the risk here isn't that, the risk here is that we would have an adverse impact on our schools.
Okay. I just wanted to ask enough questions to make someone say compression, just to see how everyone's face looked at. That's all I have.
Commissioner
Um,
Edlin?
Yeah, thank you. Would this potentially this action take resources from North Macadam as we know it today?
No,
Or diminish what's available there?
no.
Does PSU anticipate any potential faculty and staff housing?
I think the program on the University Place, I think they're certainly interested in student or PSU-related housing, which is combined with market rate housing. I think at this point in time, the RFP is pretty open in terms of what the program would be on the University Place site, but it's certainly one that they've contemplated for housing in the past.
To the extent that it's appropriate, I guess I'd like to encourage them to think about staff housing in particular. You think about reducing commutes and affordability and whatnot. You mentioned in the presentation, it's in the material that you shared with us on Jasmine Tree, potentially a joint PSU city development. What might that look like?
So it's similar to the city PSU development that right now is contemplated on what they call the XSB site, which is back off of the park blocks. If PSU, the way that the development agreement is framed is that if PSU and the city are unsuccessful at pursuing funds for a joint School of Education city project on that site, a joint project could then move to Jasmine next.
So would that have both city functions and PSU functions, for
That's
example?
correct. Okay. As well as the
And-
ground floor commercial, et cetera.
Would that be jointly owned in that case?
I think that's yet to be determined. The agreement between the city and PSU leaves it open to either be a lease or co-ownership.
And the 13 million for the Doubletree site, University Place site, what do you envision that might be used for?
That's a great question. I think it's something that will certainly come back before you as an intergovernmental agreement as we look to invest in the University Place site. It kind of depends on how PSU structures their partnership, and I think they're looking at any number of iterations and structures in terms of a partnership from land lease to developing it themselves. It's a great question, I think, as Dan comes up, if you talk to him, because they're certainly thinking about it as they're doing their request for proposals.
Like Charles, I'm a big fan of PSUs. This is kind of fun for me in that we develop some of these properties. And I'm really pleased to see us working in cooperation with PSU. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to ZRZ.
Sure. So the ZRZDA, the framework for this, again, this is a development of a 30-acre site that sits between the South Waterfront Towers, or community of condominiums and apartments, as well as the OHSU Center for Health and Healing and OHSU Schnitzer Campus. It's a unique opportunity for a public-private partnership, which would unlock significant public benefit through shared investment and certainty in the South Waterfront neighborhood. One of the challenges to this area, and just to call out for those who aren't familiar with the area, is it is a large open brownfield site. So there are no streets down there today. There is no greenway. It's 30 acres that includes the barge building facility by the ZRZ family, as well as just open developable land. I would like to personally thank, at this point, Dennis Allen is here with ZRZ Realty's director of, and he's the ZRZ's director of planning and development, as well as Matt French. And they are here should you have any questions about their plans or vision for their site. The DA, as we're drafting it, is structured where private development committed to by ZRZ gives the city and the public sector the financial security to make long called for local and regional public improvements. And as I look at the attendance in the audience today, I'm sure you will hear both about Southwest Bond that has long been a priority of the existing North Macadam urban renewal area, as well as the Greenway. And in exchange, ZRZ, which is a longtime property owner in that community, agrees to a firm timeline and investment both for development and public infrastructure on a tied timeline. This means that we don't make significant investments, either us or city partners, ahead of private development. Rather, it's a complementary, they do this, we do that process. As a result of this partnership, the city could get a greenway along the Willamette River, opportunities for affordable housing, and building out the necessary transportation infrastructure that also supports the growth of OHSU and their Night Cancer Challenge investments. And you'll see that a little bit later as we walk through the phasing of the slides. The property taxes generated by ZRZ and their related new development essentially pays for the majority of these improvements. So this slide gives you a sense of, with the development agreement versus without the development agreement, what is the development that we could anticipate in the next 10 years. And again, similar to the PSU development agreement, this development agreement is predicated on the extension and expansion of the North Macadam urban renewal area. The development agreement gives certainty to public benefits that could not be realized but for this agreement, not only in terms of financially, but also the ability for the city to buy parkland or housing affordability, which could not otherwise be enforced on a private property owner through other city regulatory mechanisms. In addition, without the DA, regional infrastructure like Southwest Bond, which is critical to the future build-out of South Waterfront because it was built to carry Southwest Moody and Southwest Bond as a two-way couplet, or the Greenway, would be built only as development occurred, not on a known timeline. So I'm going to walk you through the ZRZ development phasing, which is similar to PSU, is anticipated to happen over 3 phases, with the first 2 phases anticipated to happen should the URA be extended through to 2025. During this time period, PHB would also have the right to purchase affordability if housing is developed on ZRZ properties during the term of this agreement and the partnership with the city. So first, walking through phase 1, private development and infrastructure. The majority of the public investment would be in what is called Southwest Bond, which is a street that you will see shortly but does not exist today. So this is Southwest Moody, and this is where Southwest Bond would be. In total, ZRZ projects 3 new developments during phase 1 of at least $60 million of new taxable value and approximately 450,000 square feet of mixed-use development on parcels that they call blocks 1, 4, and 6. So what you see here is block 1, which is what otherwise called west of Moody, which is anticipated for a residential project. The idea behind how Bond would be designed and built is coming this fiscal year into next. We would work with PBOT to design the full length of Bond. At that point, construction would occur with adjacent development. So what you could consider phase 1A would be built concurrent with OHSU's plans for the Night Cancer Challenge building, which is what they pursued and were successful at realizing state funding for this past year. Phase 2 of Bond development would be built concurrent with ZRZ's development of Block 6. That is thought to be about a 250,000 square foot building, and what you see here is what we call the Woods Connector, so that you would actually have a couplet completed for the north end of the district similar to what the south end of the district has today. Finally, Phase 3 would come online with development of Block 4, which is anticipated by ZRZ to include about 100,000 square feet of commercial mixed use. It's important to note that what we've been discussing with ZRZ is that this portion of bond, should they only build Block 4, would only be triggered for public investment when Block 6 comes online. Other partnership items during Phase 1 would also include the Bureau of Environmental Services and ZRZ working together to identify stormwater management treatment for Phase 1, given that certain parcels west of Moody, so on this side of Moody, are unable to drain to the big pipe system, and therefore stormwater management must happen on site. This discussion also in terms of stormwater management, actually also involves the city and is critical to the city because similarly, any stormwater management off of streets, parks, et cetera, would also have to be treated on site. During Phase 1, an incremental commitment by PDC of TIF would occur at PDC's discretion for how to administer, including through our commercial property redevelopment loan products or our business finance products to assist with tenanting of the projects to help them move forward. And finally, there is a partnership contemplated between ZRZ and multiple city bureaus to look at the opportunity for interim activation of this large parcel that the barge building facility does not rely upon to see use in the near term. Phase 2 development is anticipated for those properties east of Southwest Bond and north of the Ross Island Bridge, and is projected to be at least 150 million new taxable value and 1 million plus square feet of commercial and residential space. The local east-west streets that you see connecting through to River Parkway would be funded by the private sector. Similar to Phase 1, the sizable public investment that's been projected for tax increment would be to fund the Greenway from downtown to the Ross Island Bridge with a connector going under Moody Avenue. This would be triggered when ZRZ develops a project or projects of a specific size adjacent to the Greenway. During this time, ZRZ and Parks are also proposed to enter into a partnership agreement to identify a Ross Island Bridge park in South Waterfront, including an option for the city to acquire property for park development. So again, this is an important component where the city would get a right to an option on ZRZ or privately held property for a park development that has long been called for South Waterfront as well. And finally, Phase 3 development, which again is projected to occur after the Urban Renewal Area Amendment end date, would trigger the completion of Bond Avenue through to South Waterfront, as well as River Parkway, and the completion of Southwest Gibbs. To note here, while this is anticipated to occur during Phase 3, Bond Avenue would be triggered if ZRZ built at a certain scale during Phase 2 to make sure that the district's access in and out doesn't fail at any point in time. And that's a trigger point that's been agreed to both by PBOT as well as ZRZ. If there are remaining resources either at the end of the urban renewal area or there are additional TIF resources generated by ZRZ during the time of the urban renewal area, it's at PDC's discretion to invest in additional infrastructure investment, whether it's the remaining portion of Bond or the remaining portion of the park to continue to connect the Greenway through to the central district area of South Waterfront. So at a high level, outcomes of the DA would include expediting private development, which would generate the property taxes and development resources that are needed in this district, in particular in the North Macadam urban renewal area, to invest in public benefits and improvements, like the regionally called for Greenway, Southwest Bond, or affordable housing. And it also allows the city mechanisms to acquire parks land and or to buy housing affordability, which is a key priority that continues to be called for in this district. So that gives you a sense of just the broad brush strokes of the development agreement as it is today. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Wilhoit.
Sure. Any idea how much of the 27.4 is going to be committed to infrastructure type activity or investment?
It's about 20 million of the 27.4, if not more, is committed to, it's about 8.5 million for bond. It's about 11 million, 12 million for the Greenway.
Okay.
And then the remainder is seen as, is in that, the economic development pool, which would be available for recruiting tenants.
Is there anything comparable if, you know, a citizen wanted to look at this potential investment and say, well, have you done anything like that before, and was your infrastructure commitment or responsibility as significant in that prior situation, or is this unusual, I guess, is a short question?
I think it's a little bit of both, but it's comparable to Hoyt Street properties, certainly, both in terms of the size of the geography and the development potential that's there, as well as the central district. So PDC put in a pretty sizable amount of tax increment into the central district of South Waterfront through streetcar, the tram, and some of the north-south streets. So this mirrors the central district in terms of the public sector funding the regional streets and the private sector funding the east-west streets or the local streets.
Okay, that's all I had.
Commissioner Eden.
This is the wrong forum, but I really applaud what ZRZ did with their first building. I think it's a great keystone to start the project. I hope you continue with the quality level with the rest of it. Our counterparts at Design and Review hopefully will help you do that. And the other comment I'd have for ZRZ is go faster, because it's great stuff you're doing. In the narrative that we received, it talked about parking as a potential investment. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. One of the things that we have talked about with ZRZ in terms of where those economic development resources could be invested by PDC is in parking. So similar to how we've talked about shared parking for Old Town Chinatown or the Central East Side, looking at South Waterfront potential for shared parking.
Is that a structure that potentially we would own?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Wilhoit asked about infrastructure, and I would ask a question, and I love the idea of a system-wide stormwater management system. Has there been any investigation into other distributed infrastructure items such as sewage, water, energy? Thinking about infrastructure and investments.
Sure. So district energy system is also contemplated as a potential partnership under this development agreement. The ZRZ Realty, OHSU, and the city through the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, this area was actually nominated as a climate positive candidate. And so they went through a pretty thorough analysis looking at the opportunities for district energy and district water treatment.
What do you think the probability of something like that happening is down here?
I think in many ways it's something that would be tied to the schedule of growth. So one of the challenges was just how quickly Portland grows. I think there's certainly complementary uses and complementary load between OHSU and Zidell to make it work. It's a question of how quickly do you make it pencil. OHSU has built the Collaborative Life Sciences building to be district energy ready should a centralized plant ever come online.
Having the benefit of the rearview mirror in the central district, I think it's a tremendous opportunity. I hope it's something we see come to fruition. You talked about the park and the Greenway. I would hope that parks would deliver in a timely fashion, and I think the addition of a park down there, anything we can do to try to make that happen, I think would be extremely positive. We've seen it happen down the Pearl District with Hoyt Street properties and in the Central District as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mullis.
Thank you. I think it was clear in your presentation, but I just want to go on record and make sure that we don't invest the public dollars in infrastructure until the private sector has pulled the trigger on their commitments to build. So we're not at risk of building streets and then wondering where's the development coming from. So, and then it seems to me that towards the end of your presentation, there's already been a fair amount of legwork done on affordable housing. And I'm assuming in this next month before we come back here and vote, that will continue.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
One more question.
I did have one other question on page 2 of the narrative you gave us under infrastructure, phase 1, the last bullet. It had a clawback if a building should get started and fail. What's the timing of that clawback?
Look to Geraldine. Do you know the timing of the clawback? We'll have to get back to you
Thank
with
you.
the answer. No problem.
And I guess I've got one.
Okay.
More. It's not a question, but I would just echo what Commissioner Edlund said earlier in complimenting the staff. There's a lot of moving parts in everything that we're looking at today, and there's been a lot of work put in. So thank you for that.
Yes, good
To
work.
everybody that's here and not here. I know there's other people that have worked on this that aren't in the room, so.
Mr. Quinton?
Did we get a copy of the memo from Housing? Does that hand it out? So are we going to go over that? Can we just highlight what's in that memo? Because that's the current Housing Commissioner, Commissioner Dan Saltzman, his current statement about the affordable housing objectives in North Macadam URA. Javier, I think he left. I saw him walk out. But I don't know if you want to just walk through both what's in the memo, but also where we're at in this conversation. I think that's.
Sure, so so the Housing Bureau Director, Tracy, has confirmed and reaffirmed that the housing goals that were established as part of the URA report that came with the North Macadam Urban Renewal Area, that the affordable housing targets will be maintained. This was particularly important, and we've heard from a number of partners, whether it be League of Women Voters or folks who worked on the plan, community members. This was a high priority, and so Housing Bureau is committed to that. The memo walks through what you mean and what we mean today by different levels of income distribution. So what is 0 to 30%, for example, and what the city profile looks like. You have below you what the original targets were, what we've achieved to date in the district, and so the plus or minus, sort of the delta where we are versus where we intended to be. If you go to page 3 in the table, you have what the potential additional units looks like with the current funding. So I believe that the $9 million is what they're using to back into these numbers, and so you have potential additional units of about 10 for 0 to 30 median family income, and about 63 for 30 to 60% MFI. And you see the delta with the target, so we're still below. With the additional resources, the proposed changes to the North Macadam Urban Renewal Area, you have an additional 40, or these are approximate numbers, but so they estimate an additional 40 units or so for 0 to 30, as well as 260 units at 31 to 60% MFI. And you see that that then puts us above the target for 30 to 60% MFI by 115 and below 114, excuse me, and below the target by about 80. And there were also some targets above 60%, and we don't have resources allocated for those, as you know, by the set-aside policy, so those remain completely unmet. They also identify that there's a particular site, we refer to it as Parcel 3, it's a site that PDC owns, and we are collectively committing to collaborating to move forward a mixed-use development on that site in the near term. So that would be the first investment that was made. We estimate that Housing could bring forward about $4 million to put forth into that project in the near term, as well as obviously we have the value of our land.
Any questions? Thank you. So first of all, just put it on, we get a couple of communications about all these issues today. One from Tasha Harmon, which I think was also sent by email to all the commissioners, and there's another one here from Sarah Stevenson from Innovative Housing, Inc., just to record that we've received those. We have a number of people here to testify. We're going to start out. We're honored to have the chair of the Portland Sustainability and Planning Commission, Andre Ba, and he's also submitted a letter, so welcome, sir.
Thank you. Interesting being on this side versus the other side. Before you, the letter is our letter in draft that we're planning to send to council relative to the housing. And first, I should say thank you for having me, Chair Kelly and board members. My name's Andre Ba, Chair of the Plain Sustainability Commission. And so the letter is our letter in draft. It just came out at noon, so my commissioners haven't had a chance to review it and kind of finalize it. But want to talk about our action on Tuesday, and then I'll get to an ask from you. This past Tuesday, the PSC held a hearing about the proposed substantial amendments to the Central Eastside and North Macadam URAs. Our role is to check substantial amendments and see if they are in conformance with the city's comprehensive plan. So we did not review all of the amendments, only what was considered substantial, and there's only 2 that are substantial in that view, Central Eastside and North Macadam. My members had a number of concerns with the proposed amendments, all relating to affordable housing. And just to be clear, we have delayed our vote on the conformance of the amendments with the comp plan until we have more information from PDC and the Portland Housing Bureau staff that can help us consider how affordable housing is included and how goals for affordable housing can be reached. So we did not vote no. Just want to clear that up. We just delayed the vote, and with more information, we plan to come back and reconsider it. As a commission, we use the Portland Plan's equity lens in reviewing projects that come before our commission. A significant amount of testimony that we heard on Tuesday and received focused on the lack of concrete and attainable affordable housing strategy for these URAs, and that was our concern too. We didn't hear concrete goals and attainable housing, how you're going to attain the housing strategy, or even a strategy for attaining those goals. Meeting affordable housing needs and providing for a mixed income in Central City is a priority across all of our plans. So we look in the Portland plan, in the comp plan, to have in the Central City, but across the city, and especially downtown, housing for the entire income level from 0 to, let's say, 80%. We want to have housing for those people because of the job you're doing in bringing in employment. Part of those employment is going to be from 50 in that income level, and that's going to bring diversity to our downtown. And we're looking to house those people downtown in a transit-rich environment. And as I said, it's especially important due to the economic benefits that you get when you put someone downtown that is of low income in a transit-rich central city. Affordable housing is a priority for the central city and for URAs. And so that's for us as a central city, it is a priority. And putting them downtown, putting low wage and income households downtown gives them actually a wage increase because they don't have to use cars to go to their job. PSC sees an inevitable need to devote more resources to the URAs, North Macadam and Central Eastside, to achieve basic affordable housing goals. This can only be achieved by both dedicating additional TIF revenue and having higher requirements in development agreements. This will likely require, over the life of a URA, TIF funding for affordable housing goals that go beyond what's traditionally in your agreement, kind of 30% for housing and 70% for currently allocated to infrastructure. And so my request really is that we look at ways of doing business differently for these URAs. We have asked the Portland Development Commission and the Portland Housing Bureau to return with a concrete and attainable plan for meeting affordable housing goals in the URAs. Until we have that information, we are holding our vote. And we, on Thursday, next Thursday, there's a council meeting, but I will be at the council to deliver the letter you have in front of me with the same message to council, because at the end of the day, they're the final vote on this, and they're the ones that control the purse strings. However, council has the option to vote on conformance and move the amendments forward without our recommendation. So we're not the final stop. I just want to be clear. So they can vote without us. I guess I'm here today to ask for your cooperation in working with us as a commission and really your staff to work with Portland Planning Bureau staff and Housing Bureau staff to talk about attainable goals and to talk about strategies to attain those goals. We don't need details, but we need, here's the goal and here's how we might do business differently. And from my commission's viewpoint, present that to council and say, here's how we think we can do business differently and achieve these goals in this URA. And just to give you a perspective, today in the central city, we have 30% of the housing is affordable, or 34% of the housing is affordable. We have set a goal in the central city that will be going before council that we did on Tuesday night also for the central city plan of 30% of the housing units should be affordable. So we are looking to maintain, when you look at the entire central city, a 30% of the total units being affordable between, from that standpoint. Our request is that we can work with you on these URAs to do that. I think we can get the goals and some broad strategies together, and then the development of those strategies and implementation, leave the staff over because there's a lot of work in the comp plan that is tied to the, developing housing tool chest, as Commissioner Edlin has alluded to, kind of what other things could you do that are kind of out of the box, and looking at funding strategies. And the Housing Bureau is looking at that. So is the planning folks, and there's a number of other independent folks in the housing area.
Andre, I've got 6 other people that I need to
Yes.
get up here and testify. I think you have our commitment to work with you on this and see what we
Thank
can
you.
come up with. Sure.
Yeah.
Quick one.
You talked about different ways of doing business. Did any specific suggestions arise?
One of the suggestions that we posed was, as we understand your funding is you have a 70-30 split between infrastructure and housing, is that if you look at the budget today, theoretically you have, if the district does well, you will achieve 70% and you will fund all the infrastructure that you have budgeted for today. But once that's funded, and if the district continued to do well to the end of it, that you reallocate and not allocate at the 70-30. Even though when you do reallocate, you do today increase the budgeting at 70-30, housing currently does get more, but they get it still at the rate of 30%. So if you, just to be provocative here, if you said housing 70% now, infrastructure 30%, and housing gets a bigger chunk, and yeah, it's at the end of the district, and that's based upon if the district did well, but it's thinking differently about how to do that. And then there's a set of tools that are being worked on about how to get private development as a partner, and especially that 60 to 80 category where funding's not available.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Debbie Kitchen, who is here representing the central. She's an important person in many ways, including a good competitor of mine. But she was representing the Central Eastside Industrial Council.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Kelly and Commissioners and Executive Director Quinton. I am here as President of the Central Eastside Industrial Council to speak about the Urban Renewal Amendment. Our board supports the extension and of the an expansion of the URA, but we did want to express some of our concerns about how the money is spent. These are priorities for the Central Eastside. We want to take this opportunity to share those with you. First, it's very important for us to continue to ensure efficient freight movement throughout the district. And with the more intensive development that is envisioned around the light rail stations and in the southern part of the district, we are very concerned about the ability to move freight in and out, especially through the key node of the Powell Boulevard and Ross Island Bridge. Those are important ways, gateways to getting to South I-5. And so we feel that and this was addressed by staff, and so we're supporting that to improve circulation around that district and improve some of those connections in and out of the district. That'll help the whole district as well as those specific developments around the light rail stations. We don't think that the Clinton station itself, the developments there, need additional public support except for the infrastructure improvements, unless there is affordable housing. And I don't address that in our letter because we didn't realize that affordable housing was being considered for the Clinton station or Clinton Triangle area, but that is the only exception we think where it would be needed other than the circulation. The ODOT blocks have been a long priority for CEIC as a prime area for development. We would like it to add both to the tax base as well as the employment base. So our priority is that a development there should be prioritized for private sector employment growth. And we also understand that with the more intensive development around the ODOT blocks or the light rail station, there may be a need for structured parking, and we believe that it's important to evaluate that and to work with our Parking and Transportation Advisory Committee that CEIC has. So that may be a need. And we also want to support the concerns raised by the Hosford-Abernathy Neighborhood Association. The streets of 11th and 12th between Division and Hawthorne, traffic speeds up there, and there are a lot of residential properties on both sides of those streets, and we would like to see some type of safety mechanisms there to slow traffic down. In this case, speed bumps are not a good mechanism because they're bad for freight movement, but you could have some pedestrian crossings or some lights as long as they don't intrude too far into the right-of-way, because again, we need to maintain the right-of-way to have efficient freight movement. So those are our basic concerns, and we wanted to take this opportunity just to express those. Our board is in support of the expansion for Central Eastside Urban Renewal Area. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next, Dan Zelko from Portland State University. Welcome, Dan.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinton. My name is Dan Zalko, Executive Director for Planning, Construction, and Real Estate at Portland State University. I'm here at the request of Vim Vivell, our president, on behalf of the university, and I'm here to express our support for the urban renewal boundary changes to North Macadam, the elimination of the Education URA, and the development agreement that PDC and PSU staff have been working on for the last 6 months. We also want to express our appreciation to PDC staff, in particular Lisa Abuaf, Irene Bowers, and Bob Betcone, for not only spending a lot of time, but also listening to our concerns and also understanding our constraints that we have in developing property and the various stakeholders we need to serve. So we strongly support your approval of the development agreement. We're ready to move forward with its implementation. We do have some concerns about some of the conditions, particularly at University Place. There's some assessed value requirements along with some affordable housing conditions, along with a lot of demands at PSU for our own uses there. And so we do plan to continue to work closely with the PDC and PHB on how do we make sure that those various demands and conditions don't result in nothing happening there. That being said, we do still think the DDA should be approved as it is written so we can move forward soon with its implementation.
Thank you. We'll be getting to a vote in a little while.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Next, Dennis Allen from ZRZ. Welcome.
Dennis Allen, Director of Development for the Zydo Yards and the ZRZ development property. I would like to echo the accurate statements that have been said about the time that has been put in by our staff and the PDC staff. It's been extensive over the last 6 to 9 months and even in years past over that. And while we're disappointed that we couldn't come for an approval today, I think that we understand the complicated nature of agreements like this, and we're hopeful that we're going to be able to work the language out in a timely manner. Commissioner Edlin, that sounds nice. We echo your sentiments. We want to get started with our development, and as you all know, developments of this scale take a public-private partnership to get going, and so we hope to be back with you soon and to get moving on our project. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has them. If not, I'll sit back down.
Questions? Thank you for being here today. Next is Michael Harrison from OHSU. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks. Good afternoon. We appreciate what the proposals before you today mean to job growth and job opportunities in Portland. OHSU's mission is to improve the health and well-being of Oregonians. While that's not exactly an economic development strategy, we do produce an extensive number of jobs and good-paying jobs in the pursuit of that mission. When fully staffed, the Night Cancer Challenge would allow us to hire over 380 new direct employees to be located in a new building in South Waterfront, and would result in almost 500 new non-OHSU jobs permanently in our community. In addition to these jobs, city investment in South Waterfront infrastructure also facilitates the growth of our clinical services. Specifically, we're planning a new clinical building in South Waterfront to house approximately 850 OHSU employees before the decade is out. While we're still determining exact staff mixes, OHSU has a proven track record of producing family wage jobs that will be even more accessible to East Portland once the Tillicum Crossing opens and rapid transit extends east along the Powell and Division corridors. According to Echo Northwest, the average wage for OHSU employees was over $76,000 a year in 2012, compared to a statewide average of roughly $44,000. The jobs OHSU indirectly creates in our economy also pay greater than state averages. In addition, a quarter of our existing 14,000 jobs have a low barrier to entry, requiring an associate's degree or less. As such, OHSU job growth is positioned to help Portlanders from all backgrounds achieve stable careers. I'm happy to provide more information about our future plans. Otherwise, we really appreciate PDC and the city working to help our growth develop in South Waterfront. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ruth Adkins from the Oregon Opportunity Network. Welcome.
Thank you. So good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, and Director Quinton. Thanks so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ruth Adkins, and I represent the Oregon Opportunity Network. We're a statewide organization of affordable housing and community development nonprofits, including 19 member organizations here in Portland who develop affordable housing. So I'm here today to follow up on our recent letter and to comment on the recent developments around housing affordability in the North Macadam urban renewal area. We greatly appreciate the hard work of all the staff in developing these recommendations, and we greatly appreciate the willingness to hit the pause button and answer some of the additional questions and the Planning and Sustainability Commission's action earlier this week. The city's actions in the North Macadam urban renewal area must be consistent with a comprehensive plan housing policy so that we have livable, mixed-income neighborhoods throughout Portland that collectively reflect the diversity of housing types, tenures, rental and ownership, and income levels of the region. So to date, only 200 of the 4,000 units of housing in the South Waterfront are affordable. Many, many millions of public dollars have gone into the infrastructure in that new neighborhood. Land is becoming scarce, and deals are being negotiated. Time is of the essence. We need not just the right to purchase in the future, but we need to secure now specific commitments before we move forward with these agreements, even with the additional potential future resources with the expansion, which of course are greatly welcome. Even with those additional resources, unless we have specific commitments now, the recent history has shown we will not be able to reach those goals. We will not have a likelihood of reaching those goals. As affordable housing developers, we know very well that it is no easy task to leverage resources to develop affordable housing, but we stand ready and willing to work with the city on creative solutions to provide housing opportunity for low and moderate income residents in this and in all areas of the city. So we are joining longtime housing expert Tasha Harmon and many others in requesting that PDC and City Council not adopt the proposed North Macadam and the Central Eastside URA amendments and refuse to approve new development agreements with PSU, ZRZ, OHSU, and any other landowners before identifying and incorporating specific additional affordable housing strategies and requirements, and clearly identifying and securing 3 to 6 significant sites for affordable housing. As Tasha Harmon noted, Portland is the city that pulled up a freeway to create a downtown park, redirected funds for the Mount Hood Freeway to the first light rail project, and built a big pipe. These didn't happen because we limited our vision or what we could accomplish. So we wholeheartedly support the vision of a city where all our citizens can live in these neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next, Susan Evans from Northwest Pilot Project. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm the executive director at Northwest Pilot Project. I've been in my job 29 years, so I've been an observer, an interested and passionate observer of PDC and our housing policy for that amount of time. And it's very gratifying to hear those of you mention earlier your interest and concern about affordable housing. When we were planning in 1997 for the River District and doing our advocacy as a city, we made a commitment to have a newly emerging and developing neighborhood reflect the income profiles of our city. And today in Portland, 14% of the people in our city have an income of 30% of median family income or less. So for a single person, that's $1,217 a month. We currently have a deficit citywide of 20,000 units for people at this income level, 0 to 30% of income. And at Northwest Pilot Project, we serve very low-income seniors. Most of our folks have no more than $975 a month, and every day we're turning away people that we can't house. So with North Macadam, we made the same commitment as we did in the River District to develop a new neighborhood that would have housing for all the people in our community. And we do have a beautiful building, Gray's Landing, 209 units, but only 42 of those are affordable to people at 0 to 30% of median income, just to be really clear. So today, I would like to say that when we were planning for the River District, we negotiated development agreements that identified sites. Before we had Increment, there was a way to get a commitment to do the housing. And there is an incredible opportunity in North Macadam and with the new development you've heard about today to identify sites to meet our housing goals. So I would like to implore you to do that. We talk a lot about equity in our community, and here's an opportunity to do something about that, to use your development agreements to identify. I think that you know, Commissioner Edlin, we've had a role in the Morrison, and it's a mixed income housing project. We put 30 chronically homeless people in that renters. I think it's been a success. And I think we've shown that these mixed income projects work cheek by jowl with a condo tower, your beautiful condo tower. This housing works. I'd just also like to say, as somebody who sat on an earlier committee that looked at North Macadam, in an earlier agreement with PSU, there were 150 units identified for affordable housing. We'd never seen this agreement or heard about it till today. But it looks like that commitment's been dropped, and I really think that's a shame. So I'd ask about that and say, where did that go? Why? Low-income seniors, South Waterfront's a great, great neighborhood anywhere around PSU, and I'm also a great fan of PSU, a graduate. So I think what they're doing is exciting, but I think there could be affordable housing there too.
Thank you very much. Last, we have Leah Greenwood from Reach CDC. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'm also here to talk about affordable housing and specifically as it relates to the URA amendments and the development agreements. I think I'm going to say a lot of what Susan said, so I'm not going to say everything because thank you. She already so eloquently talked about the fact that one reason we were successful in the River District is because we identified sites, and we identified them early. It's disappointing to see that the only affordable housing in North Macadam is Gray's Landing. Reach developed that. It's a beautiful building. But unless there's land identified, there's not the ability to develop the affordable housing. And waiting for all the market rate development to happen just makes it more difficult. So with the urban renewal amendments, one, I think being very clear that the affordable housing goals are still in the district, and they're still goals that PDC sees to achieve. They're not just the Portland Housing Bureau's goals or the city's goals and their PDC's goals. With the development agreements, I would completely echo the thought that we need to identify land. The notion of having a first right of refusal to buy affordability is not the way to go about getting affordable housing in the districts. We've seen how that hasn't happened yet in North Macadam, other than Block 49, which was identified site. We saw how the development agreement with NMI, actually the affordable housing goals have since been eliminated when Block 33 didn't work. I know that Parcel 3 is being looked at, and also the Harbor-Nado sites. I'd like you to go drive to those sites and tell me if they're the best sites for affordable housing. I don't think siting any housing right next to a power station is the best option. I think looking at the development agreement is such a great opportunity to have real high quality development in the district. And we know how to do it, and with the resources that were just discussed, it shouldn't be an issue. It's a matter of identify the sites, we'll figure out how to do it. And when I say we, I'm not necessarily meaning Reach Community Development, but the entire affordable housing network. We've built housing, and we can do it in a way that's most affordable when the sites are identified. So I'd ask that you consider that. I was excited to see the mention of potentially having affordable housing in the Clinton Triangle as part of the Central East Side. I think that given the location of that new development opportunity in a neighborhood that has been gentrifying over the years, I think that's an exciting element of the project. But just don't want us to back down on the affordable housing goals. I do want to make one note on North Macadam. The affordable housing goals were tiny. They were tiny to begin with. When we started that district, we didn't even come close to achieving the Central City housing policy in the initial goals. So any thought of us not even meeting the tiny goals that we set, when you look at that, the framework plan and those goals, it was a constrained funding model goal.
Thank you very much. Okay, so our next order of business then is, in fact, the PSU development agreement. Thanks, you ladies.
I asked him to come back up in case you guys
In the
had
event that you
questions
have any
before we
questions.
took the action.
This comment about 150 affordable housing units that were committed to and didn't happen, do we have any comment on that?
So there was an agreement that was signed between PDC and PSU when the property was bought someplace around 10 years ago that carried an affordable housing portion as part of that agreement. And looking at it, that portion has expired. That being said, the development agreement also anticipated different phasing of development that has never occurred either.
So the provisions that are in this document are meant to replace that. They do trade out first right of refusal for that goal, but it is that was established in a different time frame.
Well, I would assume the good people at PSU are as committed to affordable housing as everyone in the room, so we have some future ahead of us, and I would just hope they're listening to the comments that others are making and that we're making and see what's possible. I know we had discussion or comments about housing for faculty on site, but it seems that there's a global need for consideration of affordable housing units in everything we're doing development-wise, so I would just reiterate what's already been stated. Let's take a look at what we can do and every opportunity we can do it.
Commissioner Edlin, any other questions, comments? Okay, Chair, take a motion.
Sure, I would move approval.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Our next item of business, we're at time we're supposed to be done, so we're going to try to expedite this next one.
So we need to adjourn the,
We need to adjourn the PDC Commission meeting and call to order. I got some language here to read. Thank you very much. Members of the Portland Development Commission will now meet as the Commission's local contract review board to consider the next item on the agenda. So we are reconvened as the contract review board. The next item has to do with the Centennial Mills and a action adopting findings in support of an emergency status, proving an expedited alternative contracting process for selective demolition of Centennial Mills, resolution number 7089, and it carries with it a request to have a vote once we have some testimony from our staff.
Will, do you want everybody up here now, or can
Yeah,
they come up when you
we
guys?
do.
Okay, that's fine. So somebody's iPhone. Someone's phone. Your phone.
Can I turn this on? Chair Kelly, I do think there's some public testimony as well after our presentation, so. No, did they?
There is public
you have
testimony?
Yeah, you got to.
I haven't got any slips on that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we get started? Bruce Wood, the Real Estate and Construction Services Manager, and sitting beside me is Will Thier, the Senior Program Coordinator. Beside Will is Nate Ingrafia, Nate Ingrafia from KPFF Engineers, and Angie Jansky with Flowing Solutions. Nate and Andy have been working and involved in the Centennial Mills project for over 15 years, or their firms for 15 years, and they're experts, and they're going to testify later in the presentation to some of the findings that we'll discuss. So we're here today to talk about a resolution to declare emergency findings to help us move forward with the selective deconstruction of the Centennial Mills project, certain buildings out there. I'm going to spend a couple of quick moments and talk about where we were like last October 20th, the last board meeting, and then I'll turn it over to Will as he moves forward with the rest of the presentation. So as you recall, back on October 29th, we had a very healthy meeting and discussion about Centennial Mills. We were there to specifically talk about the public investment, bring you up to speed. There was a lot of things discussed, and from that, there were some specific directions that you asked us to pursue at this time, and those were, to consider the potential of the selective deconstruction, and there was a very clear message that says we really need to move this thing forward, and as well, some of you guys have taken tours and have seen what's happened, so we're going to discuss that more today. You also asked to review the options for the immediate repairs and to continue to work with Harsh on the creation of the DDA, and finally continue to provide the board with regular updates. So today's resolution is in response specifically to the request on the selective deconstruction. And the action today will adopt emergency findings that will permit us to pursue an expedited alternative contracting process for the selective deconstruction of the property. Now, what is different? Now, we originally planned on the demolition work occurring we were trying to push it into 2015, but the original schedule thought we'd have our permits and clear into 2016. What occurred this past year in the spring is a series of events that were just completely unforeseen, at the time, where the columns shifted dramatically toward the river. There were openings in the roof structures created more water because there was so much snow and rain last year, we think exacerbated it. And then early fall, one of the OMF guys actually had a minor injury in the building during an inspection. We relocated the MPU for a month or so, and then they moved back. And then starting in October, we started having beams collapse. And the last collapse occurred just last week. And that beam took out a sprinkler section. And so we can't repair the sprinkler, so we have to rewrite things. So this was just this cascading of events that were unforeseen. And so that required us to kind of recognize that this has reached a point of critical failure. And therefore, we are here today to try to move this forward so we can get the demolition started or deconstruction of certain elements of the building done as quickly as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So today, PDC staff is requesting that the board adopt Resolution 7089. Per Oregon Revised Statute 279C.320 and 279B.080, the LCRB can adopt emergency findings regarding a project and thereafter authorize an expedited alternative procurement process. So in today's presentation, I'll present the emergency findings prepared by PDC staff. Then I'll talk about the alternative contracting process itself, describe the scope of work that will be contracted for, and then I'll conclude with a projected schedule and future board actions. So the building's condition constitutes an emergency as defined by 279A.010, Section 1, Paragraph F, based on the following findings: that the circumstances could not have been reasonably foreseen, that there is a substantial risk of loss, damage, and/or interruption of services, and that the situation requires prompt execution of a contract in order to remedy the situation. This emergency declaration will allow the PDC to expedite an alternative contracting process and promptly solicit a contractor to commence selective deconstruction while still supporting a competitive process. It also allows PDC to consider various factors in contractor selection, such as performance, capabilities and capacity, business equity, safety, and the salvage plan. I'm going to show a summary of each of these, but the full emergency findings are attached to the resolution as Exhibit A. Andrew Jansky of Flowing Solutions and Nathan Ingrafia of KPFF are here to provide some further statements regarding the technical aspects of these findings. So they're going to take you through the next 3 slides.
Okay, so the first slide here, this photo that you see on the right is a hole in the roof. It's relatively representative of what you see throughout the structure at this time. There are multiple holes in the roof like this. These come from a failure of the roofing material itself, the membrane, which has then caused water to enter the structure and rotted the structure. This is something that we've seen accelerate over the last 6 months to a year. This particular hole, actually, this photo was taken in the summertime, probably August. I was back up there in October and November, and it's probably 2 to 3 times this size in just a couple of months. I haven't actually examined every single hole in the project, but I'm sure that the rest of them are behaving the same way. And what this is indicating is that the roofing that was installed over the entire roof at a similar time has gotten to a critical point where it's just no longer functional, and hasn't been probably for a few years, which has now led to this rotting and collapse of structural members and decking and so forth. The next bullet point here, the wharf column. So the wharf is what we consider the portion of the project that's over the river.
so beyond the seawall, out over where the high water can occur in the river. There are columns that we observed back in February that are actually leaning out towards the river. In other words, that portion that's over the water is beginning to tilt and towards the river. That's something we hadn't seen before. And unfortunately, that portion is tied back through the rest of that warehouse. This is warehouse C that we're talking about, the furthest south portion of the site. And it has the potential, if it were to continue to move, to collapse and actually pull a portion of the rest of the building with it. And then, as I said earlier, other sections of the roof have collapsed. I think Will mentioned earlier that there's multiple falling beams, one just last week that took out a portion of the fire suppression system. We've gotten to this kind of critical point now where we're seeing stuff happening on a not just yearly but monthly and weekly basis, something new each time we go in there, and that's very much a warning sign to us. You want to take this one?
Sure. So the next slide shows out near the water, the pilings that support the building above, and as you can see, some of the pilings are not actually even attached to anything. The original design, those piling were supporting the building, and as the riverbed has shifted and the piles have shifted, they've either pulled away from the structure above or they've rotted completely through. The building originally had a lot of load on it, but we got by with in the short term because that load's gone, all the flour and everything's out of it. So we had a little bit of a safety factor there that we've been working in. And how these pilings decays, you would think that the worst damage occurs in the winter when you have storm and wind and today's type of weather. But actually in the piling area, the worst damage occurs in the summer when the tides come in and out and the water goes up and down, and those piling are right at that zone. They get wet and dry every day. And so the decay is really accelerated during the summer. So, I was probably one of the first people when you obtain this property to go under there and look around. So I've been able to watch it. I have a kid in college that was, I think, born when this happened, or maybe high school. So it's really I've been able to see it just in the probably last year. A piece started to really move and was very visible. So the most important thing, at least in my world, I do the regulatory stuff, is to protect the environment in the river for fish and wildlife from things that might fall in the river from the building. And that is, that's one of the, that's a challenge, because if this does start to really come apart this winter, it's really hard to get someone out there and do it, to track it down and to really control what's happening. That's why we need to have a more calculated response to plan out to make sure the Corps is on board with what we're doing and the Department of State Lands, and that we don't have impacts to the Superfund. And if we had a catastrophic emergency and we just had to get out there and deal with it, it would be less protective of the environment. And that's where the costs, if we get into that situation, are a lot higher, because you just don't have the flexibility, and life safety is the most important thing in the catastrophic emergency. Compared with doing it now, we can try and balance other factors like environmental protection, safety, and other things.
Thank you. Questions for these gentlemen?
Do we have any graphic so that everyone knows what we're talking about as far as what might be going and what might be staying?
Yes, we do, and we'll get into that.
Okay.
As well as these photographs and these gentlemen's testimony, we actually had staff out on site yesterday during a heavy rain shower and was able to capture some video. So we've got that here. Let me see if I can get it to work.
risk of being obvious, it doesn't seem like we want staff getting too close to that facility right now.
Right. There,
Is there audio?
yeah, there should be audio. As you can see, there's water that's pouring. This is taken inside of the buildings. So this is water that's just flowing down through the interior of the building. And you can imagine what that sort of water damage can do over a very rapid amount of time.
I've said it several times, each commissioner should have the opportunity to push the plunger every now and then. It's just not, it doesn't make sense to even be talking about this right now.
So I'll go into the alternative process, and then we'll get into some drawings about what the site's going to look like after the selective demolition is complete. So I just want to say again that the primary goals of this alternative contracting process are speed, the maintenance of competitive process, and then being able to contract with a quality firm that can do the job. So towards that end, proposal requirements that we put out are going to be clear enough and simple enough for vendors to easily respond within this tight time frame. The selective deconstruction and salvage RFP is currently targeted to be released Monday. Excluding time around the holidays, the RFP will be out for approximately 19 business days. Once the proposals come in mid-January, then a 5-person evaluation committee will evaluate the proposals based on various criteria. And then staff will return to the board in early 2015 to request approval of the terms and the amount of the selective deconstruction contract. Now I'll move into the scope portion of the presentation. And I want to make clear up front that the feed and flour mill buildings are not planned to be included in this scope of work. So one of the findings of a 2006 BPS historic preservation assessment states, quote, "The flour mill and the feed mill are particularly significant buildings. They most succinctly embody the mill's historic significance and convey its industrial character and should be prioritized in developing a preservation and redevelopment scheme." So although we will be moving forward with selective deconstruction of this site, we're still maintaining our sensitivity to the needs of to the public and the community. So by preserving these two buildings, the proposed scope of work is consistent both with Harsh's preferred site plan that we covered at the last board meeting, as well as this 2006 BPS assessment. So now this slide shows the layout of the Centennial Mills complex. The feed and flour mills are highlighted in green, and then you can see all of the other buildings around them. This is what the site will look like after the job is finished. So remaining structures will include the feed and flour mills, as well as the basement perimeter wall here along NATO, as well as the seawall that runs along the seashore, or the riverbank, excuse me. I also wanted to cover the wharf deconstruction. As was noted in the previous board meeting, Centennial Mills property lies within the jurisdiction of several different agencies. And in order to navigate the various permitting requirements for each of these agencies, the deconstruction of the wharf will be accomplished in 2 phases. So the first phase will involve carefully removing the wharf buildings from above the basement slab level, which is that red dashed line. And then the second phase, once we have the full Corps and DSL permits, will be for the in-water work where you see the pilings below the red dashed line. So then I'll just wrap it up with an overall schedule and then next steps for board action. The projected schedule anticipates commencing the work after the PDC board has approved a contract in March of 2015. Permits for the City of Portland, Army Corps of Engineers, and Department of State Lands will all be pursued concurrent to this emergency procurement process. And then I also want to just call out, not shown on this schedule, but also happening concurrently, will be the acquisition of an owner's representative consultant, as well as developing a design-build RFP for the follow-on redevelopment-related improvements. So that includes things like the riverbank restoration and the greenway design. However, further decisions regarding both the PDC budget for this project as well as the disposition and development agreement with Harsh will be needed to inform that design-build RFP before it can be issued in its entirety. And that concludes our presentation.
And I just wanted to make a couple more points. The action today, it supports the Harsh plan. Right? I mean, that's the plan we're moving forward, but it doesn't commit us to expenditures under that plan. At this point, there will be another process where we come back through and bring that information for the board. Plus, there'll be a robust public engagement process and everything that we outlined in the last board meeting. And there was some discussion about the MPU. As you could see in this plan, the MPU, it needs to be relocated, and the mayor's office is working on that effort, and they are aware of this action today, and that we're targeting sometime in March, that if things go well, that they would find a place to temporarily relocate the MPU. So with that, if there's any questions or what, we can answer anything else.
Charles?
Well, do we want to hear testimony before we ask, or do we want to do that now?
Why don't we ask the questions of these guys, and then we'll hear testimony, then we'll vote on it.
Do we know what the annual cost to PDC is of maintaining that property? Just having it standing?
Yeah, no, it's, OMF manages it for us. Last year, I think, and again, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's, I think, a little less than $100,000. But it's in that neighborhood that it does cost us a fairly significant amount of money to kind of keep it secure. OMF inspects it on a regular basis. The biggest issues are security, trying to keep people out of it, and that's been a real problem.
And the cost we're talking about is direct costs, meaning if someone does go in there and something happens and they're injured, that's our issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's our issue. Yeah.
And to be clear, we have two gentlemen who are expert in their industry who have looked at this building and have provided an assessment, and what I'm hearing is the cost of cleanup greatly exceeding the cost of controlled deconstruction. I'm obviously concerned that we are putting money on a continuing basis in a facility that is going to cost far too much to try to save it. And I'm no hater of buildings or architecture, but I am trying to be a practical economic person in a role as a PDC commissioner. I can't understand why we're talking about this, but I know why we're talking about it. It seems that the passage of time has brought us to a place where we don't really have much of an option, and we have to be very strategic in how we deconstruct, prepare property for redevelopment and redevelopment in a way that maximizes the funding that we have available to us. So I don't have any questions, it's just a statement.
Commissioner Ely.
It's when you say cleanup, should have fallen into the river.
Well, I guess, I mean.
So Bruce, when you were in front of us at the last meeting, I believe a statement was made that the cost to demo versus the cost to prepare it for development, so to speak, for lack of a better term, those were basically a push, if I recall.
The cost of, I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Taking it down versus saving it was roughly a push.
Yes, yeah. I mean, given its condition, you can't really save. You have to rebuild it anyway. So actually, estimates, it could be more because you got to tear it down anyway. It depends on what's going to go there.
I think one thing as you go forward with this and start to get numbers back, it's going to be critical for us all get an update on that and understand what we're getting into when we get to the contracting phase. When it's redeveloped, if I understand what you said correctly, you're going to deconstruct some of the pilings in phase 2 of this demolition, is that correct?
Currently, all of the pilings that are beyond the seawall will be removed. during this.
And that will happen with the work that we're contemplating today?
Well, it's a two-phase development, so it's in the original scope, but it's a different permitting process, which will take as long as, we doubt if we will have that permitting process done by the summer of 2015.
Will you be going out with an RFP for both phases at this point in time, or just phase one? So it'll be
Both
contemplated in
phases.
this phase, okay? I've got concern, and I mentioned this when we met the other day, and as I've thought about it more, I think the potential liability for us of change orders and unforeseen conditions and something like this is extraordinary. And when we talked yesterday, I was talking about, contracting and getting somebody that's a whole heck of a lot smarter than me to write that contract. And as I thought about more and more, I actually think as you put the RFP together, there's probably a trail there that we need to be very careful to protect the public. I would hate to be sitting here in 6 months and being faced with a change order that's of a large magnitude. So it'd be my word of caution as you go forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullis?
Thanks, and just if I can ask you, Mark, I mean, you're assuming the change orders in this process if we choose this path, and I'm sure we could run into the same issues if we tried to save it.
There's a little project going on up in Seattle right now where a big chunk of Seattle sunk about 1.5 inches. Boy, can you imagine the discussions around that?
So you spoke earlier to some of the bid criteria. And can somebody provide a few more details on that? So I'm assuming you're looking at, bonding and workers' comp mod rates and past performance on, similar projects. Can somebody just speak to that a bit more, since it seems
Sure.
like it's potentially going out the door pretty quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So the typical contracting process that the PDC employs is a low bid process, which really only allows you to consider the price of the bid. However, this project is of such complexity that it's quite obvious that in order to successfully accomplish this task, we need to be able to evaluate prospective contractors on multiple different parameters. So some of those would include their experience in general, but their specific experience within water work, their safety plan, but then also their safety record, their means and methods, because you could have a contractor who might decide to hire a large number of workers, and they're out there with minimal equipment, which would increase the risk of injury, versus a different contractor who would maybe use a larger proportion of equipment with a lower number of manpower. So these are the types of considerations that we'll be looking at.
We have our procurement manager here as well, if you have more detailed questions.
No, I think that helps, and maybe this was stated earlier in the presentation, but I missed it, but I talked to it in our briefing the other day, and that's that our equity policy applies to this contract, so that'll be part of the submittal as it goes out the door.
Yes, that will be one of the criteria that we evaluate.
Okay. And I would just echo again what Commissioner Edlin just said, and I could see it in either scenario. I mean, if we choose this path to do the demo, or if we said, no, we're going to try and save it all, I could see that in either scenario, we could get, if we're not very, very careful, get hit with big change orders, because, I toured that place about a month ago, and it is literally falling down around your ears. So I just think Mark made a very good point, in that we're going to have to write our contracts very well and be very, very mindful that everything is scoped out properly, and so that the work is executed safely, and it gets done right, and it gets done inside the budget amount.
Sure.
Question for the professionals. What's the risk of losing the 2 buildings that we're trying to save through this demolition process? Maybe a different way to ask the question is are you confident that we could do this demolition and save those 2 structures?
Yeah, the two structures that we're talking about, keeping the feed mill and the flour mill, are actually structured out of reinforced concrete. The majority of the site is timber construction. There's some concrete topping on wood floors, but by and large, it's a wood structure. Those two buildings are reinforced concrete walls with wood interior floors, but they're not structurally connected to the surrounding structure, or the structures that we're talking about demolishing. So it's actually a relatively low concern that we would damage them, fortunately. And that's part of what went into choosing those two buildings to preserve. Yeah.
Can I just ask, Commissioner Edelin, are you suggesting, are you providing certain guidance to us on the type of contract to be aiming for as part, because we're issuing an RFP shortly. Are you more inclined to push a fixed price, or like you're saying be careful. You're saying be careful.
I just want to make sure we get some of the brightest attorney we can that are representing us and advising us about what form of contract. And the more I thought about it after we met the other day, I made the comment yesterday or the day before, but I think going all the way back to the RFP process, I just, we're starting to build a trail, and, I could just see it being fraught with peril.
Okay.
So, which I'm confident staff will do.
Just from a sustainability perspective, Mike, I got a couple comments, but there's a tremendous amount of high value lumber in that, and there's a forest there. A piece of Oregon was put into those buildings, and there's a lot of high value, and there's an industry out there that will buy that for a lot of money. So we really need to make sure we cover that in our RFP. I think you already know that. So then my second comment, I know that Harsh is anxious to get into a development agreement, and I'm assuming that this isn't going to hold us up on our process to move that along, and I'm kind of hoping that maybe the next meeting we could have a staff presentation and to the level that we could then, as a commission, give input and then vote on a design or a development agreement the following meeting. Am I putting you on the spot there, Bruce, or is that a will?
No, I think that's doable. Yeah. It's our desire to get into that agreement as quick as we can.
Yeah, and I just want to make a note of appreciation that the Harsh people are here today, and Jordan's in the back of the room listening intently to this discussion. And I'd comment too that I think us doing this is going to help move the whole process along, and so that's a good thing too.
And we can, as you and I talk, we can commit to that. I think we would like to come back with the next board meeting, seeing as how the timeline doesn't have us coming back on this matter, to come back with the answers to the questions that you posed in the last board meeting, but also the questions that we still have open on the development agreement. Presuming we can work through that, then we can go back, and then we'd have the agreement, as you say, in February. So I think we can meet that timeline. So.
Thank you very much. We've got a few people here to offer some testimony, and since the parking garage closes at 6, we're going to move this along so my car doesn't get impounded. Priorities. Our first one is Patricia Gardner from the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. Welcome, Patricia.
Great. Hi, Patricia Gardner, Pearl District. I'm here on behalf of the Pearl District, and I'm just going to say this. I'm flabbergasted about this meeting, because the last time we had a meeting, we talked about a public process, and now we're having a meeting that we weren't even notified about. I found out about this meeting via reporters that we're going to tear down 80% of the site. That's a really tough thing for the public to be swallowing, particularly on a project that's supposed to have such great public involvement and has had amazing public involvement in the past. And so completely disheartening. So I wanted to state that this process is messed up. And we don't even know what the plan is. We haven't even talked. You're going to demolish everything and preclude a lot of options, because the public hasn't even bought in on any plan that's on the table, because there hasn't been any public involvement at all, period. And so this is backwards. You're going to tear down everything. You're going to tear it all down, all of it, pretty much, without any public process. So I've gotten that out of my system. So now I've got some real important questions to ask you. Could the circumstance not be reasonably foreseen? You guys knew in 2000 that the building needed to be taken care of. Every time anybody's walked through, you've known the building's been needing to be taken care of. If you leave a hole in a roof, it gets bigger. I mean, that's just what happens. If you don't take care of a building, it falls apart. So could it not have been reasonably foreseen that the 14 years that you've owned it, that it would get worse? Of course it could have been reasonably foreseen. And so you've got us all backed into a corner of emergency for something that we all knew was going to happen. So that's bad. That's really bad policy. The second thing is the demolition of this site was always supposed to be around $15 million. So if you spend that $15 million today to get it to where you're talking about, what does that mean for the development for Harsh? You don't have that in your budget. So where are you going now regarding the budget? We talked about the budget at the last meeting. So are you going to have $30 million? Are you ready? Are you prepared to look at the budget and add an additional $30, $40 million to it for this project? Because you know you're spending, with your decision, you're spending at least 10, if not 15, which is what they always said. So I think, where are you going? Where are you going on the site? I mean, really, and where are you going from a money point of view, and where is the public involvement on it, and what's going on? And so, I hear words like sensitivity and protect the public, and I'm going, where? Okay, we're ready for all of that, and, we're not seeing it. So I just want to say we're dismayed, and we really hope that, you don't move forward to this. And I know you've got all kinds of liability you got to think about, but tearing it all down without any public process is challenging, really challenging, and particularly on such a high-profile project that the public's been trying for years to get something wonderful to happen on. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Richard Graham.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Well, I came here, I'm a retired architect, kind of a newcomer to Portland, and I have seen nothing but incredible potential for this particular project. And I came here to give some kind of, what I thought were kind of exciting verbiage describing how this thing could come about, but I think I need to save all of that for some future date when the developer's in place and there are schemes to be presented. But in the meantime, I just concur with what Patricia said. I'm a member of I live in the Pearl District. I'm a member of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association. And it just appears to me as an architect that the cart is before the horse here. It doesn't seem to me to make any sense to not have a development plan, not have a concept, not have any notion of what you might do with this site, and then start tearing things down. And I guess my question to you is, why has this plan, what's holding this plan up? What's holding the process up that's preventing this from happening in an orderly way? So I guess that's my speech. I would look forward to coming back here when there is a plan in place, and I have, I think, important things I might be able to say about how the development should proceed. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Next, we have John Kirby. I think it's John. Did I get the name right?
Name is right.
Welcome.
In the interest of your car and time here, I would just like to underline what the previous two people said. And my thought is one of dismay that this intentional neglect was allowed to happen for 10 years to a city resource that had some great potential, and to say that it was unforeseen is hard to believe. Anybody could foresee what was going to happen for 10 years of intentional neglect, if that's possible, or gross neglect. That's my piece.
Thank you. So, we have a motion before us. Some discussion?
Yeah, a question. Can we ask Bruce to come back up?
Absolutely.
Bruce, I'd like you to address the question that Patricia raised around dollars spent. Notice if we go forward with this, are we doubling down on what we're spending on this based on what we heard
No,
last
I don't
time?
think we are. I mean, the The estimate that we have for this phase, it's not based on any specific drawings. I mean, it's a good estimate, but again, it's just an estimate. Is about $4.2 million for this work.
How much, I'm sorry?
4.2.
Okay.
And again, that number was based, I couldn't really tell you what it was based on, but the demo number that was carried by the consultants up to this point is around 4.2. You know, it supports a plan moving forward. I mean, the challenge of this project has always been, what do you do? You know, and it's a very complicated project. And this particular scope of work would be done regardless of what we do moving forward. I mean, it's just, that's the fact. And I definitely appreciate the comments that were before, but that's where we are today.
Asked another way, is it safe to assume that the funds that will be expended on this are included in the total PDC costs that we talked about last month?
Yes.
Thank you.
And to be clear, when we talked about this last time, the point I raised is we need to consider preparing the property for development. And my understanding is what we're talking about today is selective deconstruction of facilities or properties that basically are not salvageable. And
yeah, well,
I may take a little exception to intentional neglect or ignoring. I've been here a long time, and we've been trying to do something on this site for a long time. Right. And I believe part of that is public desire of what they wanted on the site, and obviously we don't all agree on everything, so here we sit. But we do sit some 10 years later, and Mother Nature is not kind to buildings that are not occupied or taken care of.
And I will say the framework plan back in 2006 identified the flour and the feed mill as the iconic elements, you know, to try to preserve, which this plan tries to preserve those buildings. We're not tearing those down. As far as the scope of work goes, there are other items within the building that people want to preserve. And as part of this scope of work, there'll be an effort to go through and inventory those and give those, and these are things like signage, there's some, you know, doors that were used, there's, you know, a boiler that we might want to leave. I mean, there are things that are of significance in there that are just smaller, that we can inventory and work to preserve those as well. And then as far as the effort moving forward on salvage, there will be, you know, components that will also be kind of deconstructed and laid off to the side, and then hopefully be reused in the future development as well. So that's where we're at.
Is Harsh supportive of this work?
And they're here.
Jordan, if you want to come up and say a couple
things. Come up
we...
and, if that's okay?
As so often happens in life, I think for all of us here, all of you commissioners and people attending, we can always look back as to what we did yesterday and probably figure out today how we could have done it better. So I think it's absolutely valid that while, Commissioner, you said you've been working on this for a long time, in hindsight, if we would have known then what we know now, probably some issues of fixing some roofs and covering and so forth should have been done. But that's not where we are. We've got to deal with what we have today. If the previous developer had been successful, more of the project, when Art Demur and I looked at it and competed 4 or 5 years ago, it'd be a different story today. So I think while my preservationist heart hurts that more of this is deteriorated, the fact is that the plan that is before you now is, with the research that we did, the most logical thing to do from the cost-benefit analysis of the team that we brought together. So I think it is appropriate work, and with the deterioration with the latest storms, there is a life safety issue, and I think you are now being sort of pushed into a corner where you need to approve the recommendation that staff has approved. The second part, though, is, and the only thing I'd ask for clarification, because I sort of heard two things, back to the development. The complaint of citizens that there's not been much public process is absolutely valid. We've been sitting ready since last spring with what we thought was a recommended plan and are excited about meeting with the public. We can't start that process till the development agreement's done, And what I'm still unclear about is why that's taken so long. At the October session, you asked, can you get the development agreement done? And I think the expectation was we'd have it done in November. It's now December and we haven't seen it. And you asked if what was being done now was consistent with the development agreement. I think the answer was yes. So I still don't understand when you said, can maybe the next meeting, the staff present the development agreement? And I think Patrick said, well, maybe it's February. So I don't understand why the development agreement isn't done, knowing that the amount of subsidy is still a fluid piece, because there are pieces here that we need the public input from, such as the bridge and the dock and other things, that until we get that input, we as a developer won't be ready to make our final recommendation, nor staff, as to what really is recommended to be developed there. So when you asked for next meeting, will presentation on the development agreement be done, is that going to happen? I mean, we've been waiting since April.
Well, I think what we're asking for, because I totally appreciate your frustration, first of all. In fact, it's a pretty complex project. We've had a presentation. In fact, that was a public meeting where concepts were presented here.
Yes.
The commission hasn't really had, the commissioners haven't had an opportunity to really weigh in, because we've got to balance what we're investing in that project with other potential investments or ones that we know are in the pipeline in the same URA. So that's really the purpose of the next meeting. And then we should be able to take that information, staff negotiate with you, and the following month have an agreement.
But I would suggest you just put a placeholder in as to the amount of money, because I think it will move up and down after we go to the public and get input from them, and then you ultimately see whether there are the funds to do what the public indicates they'd like to do. I just wouldn't see that line item is what's holding it up. And I think if we'd had the time and had the public sessions with all the expertise we surrounded ourselves with, and the $1,300,000 of money we spent, $800,000 of which was ours, then I think the public would have all heard why the buildings have deteriorated as much and what the logic was. And they would have been able to ask directly to all the wonderful professionals we brought in and gotten answers to their questions.
We hear what you're saying. It's, placeholders, if we put placeholders on all of our development agreements, and we would be in a chess game that we might get cornered on. So we have to be careful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But to be clear on the question, Harsh is supportive of this work, and it's not an impediment to your development.
That's correct. The plan that we submitted showed that these two buildings would be the ones that would be preserved, and put the money into those. We would like to, when we've talked to Bruce has been great, they've been up every week and talked. There are a number of, you talked about the salvage, there are a number of pieces from the other buildings that I think could be incorporated into the new development, which would honor the past and be a wonderful architectural and aesthetic addition to the site.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So we need to have a vote. John?
Yeah, just a couple things, and I think these two gentlemen touched on it, but I would have to disagree with the assessment that there's been intentional neglect. I mean, part of the reason it's taken so long is what everybody has dubbed the Great Recession, which frankly, I've never seen anything really that's great about it. But that obviously, took a lot of time and took a lot of effort, and again, we can sit here and look backwards and say, well, we should have fixed some roofs, or we should have done some stuff. And if we would have spent hundreds of thousands or maybe a couple million fixing up buildings that then at the end of the day would have been torn down as part of the master plan after the public input, then we look bad for that as well. So we're in a very difficult position no matter what decision we make tonight. And it seems to me after the work that I've done is this is the reasonable and prudent thing for PDC to do.
Yeah, I'm a remodeling contractor.
And hopefully we'll accelerate the development of the project.
I'm a remodeling contractor. When I look through a building, I'm looking about how to remodel it. When I went through that building, there isn't much, except what we are leaving, that can be remodeled in a practical sense. It's too bad, but that's what and I know everybody in the area may feel bad about that, but it's just a reality, in my opinion. So,
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.